South Burlington Development Review Board meeting for June 16th, 2020. My name is Matt Cota. I'm the chair of the Development Review Board. Also on the Development Review Board with me tonight are Brian Sullivan, Don Philibert, Jim Langdon, John Wilking, Alyssa Portman, and Mark Baer. Also in attendance from the city of South Burlington, Marla Keene, the Development Review Planner, and Delilah Hall, the Zoning Administrator. We'll start with tonight's agenda with additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items. I don't have anything to mark. Does anyone else on the board have any additions, deletions, or changes, or staff? Seeing none, I'll go to announcements. And as I do before every go-to-meeting Development Review Board meeting, I want to thank those in attendance and those on the phone, those watching online. This hearing is being recorded and will be available. Anyone who wishes to participate in this hearing should sign a virtual sign-in sheet, which is in the chat box, or they can also send email to Marla Keene at mkeene, M-K-E-E-N-E, at sburl.com and provide your contact information. It's important that you sign in digitally because you want to be considered a participant. You may want to be considered a participant should you want to obtain party status in order to appeal a decision made by the Development Review Board. We will ask for comments on a number of the items on the agenda towards the end of the agenda items, but we also will read comments that you submit in writing. So I would encourage you to do that as well. Some basic guidelines of these virtual DRB meetings. If you haven't participated in one before, just like when we meet in person, the public will have an opportunity to comment on the phone, the computer, or an email. These meetings do have a 4-hour limit. We will not go past 11 p.m. And we hope to we will get to everything on the agenda. And I ask everyone that's not speaking to mute their phone or hit the mute button on their GoToMeeting app so that we don't hear the background or ambient noise. We do have the ability to mute all if the sounds become too challenging, but we hope not to do that. And I hope everyone will just mute their phones and computers where they can. Next item is item number 3, which is comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. If there's anything that the public would like to see, I'd ask them to raise their virtual hand either by indicating in the chat box or by saying their name when asked. So is there any public comments as not related to the agenda? Saying so. If there are any, please say your name. Checking the chat box, I see none. So I'll move on to agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4 is final plat application SD 2019 of Adam Hergenrother Companies to amend a previously approved planned unit development for a 450-acre planned unit development for a golf course in 354-unit residential development. The amendment consists of amending the approved tree preservation area and landscaping planting plan, reducing the rear setback for lot 6 of the Long Drive project area and allowing a private easement and fence to be placed in common lands at 159 Long Drive. Now this is a final plat application, and we'll go over what it specifically is in this case, but as for all final plat applications, within the last 6 months, we've received a sketch plan and provide oral guidance to the applicant. We've received a preliminary plat application at a formal hearing and offered further guidance and provided an opportunity for the public to comment. This is the beginning of the final stage of the review for the DRB. We're here to ensure conformance with applicable land development regulations. And after the hearing, the applicant, staff, and the public, we may choose to continue for a later date. Future date will be announced prior to concluding this item. We'll also vote on whether to close the hearing. We may vote whether to close the hearing at the conclusion of this hearing. And once closed, we'll issue a decision on the application. The decision will be mailed to the applicant and those who have identified themselves as interested persons. No appeal of the board's decision is made within 30 days. The decision is final. That applicant may proceed with the project. That's the basic guidelines of what a final plat application is. Who is here for the applicant for SD 2019?
Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates.
And Adam Hergenrother.
Hi, Adam. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
Can I just interrupt? This is Marla. So this final plat was not preceded by a sketch because this is considered an amendment that does not require a sketch plan review. This project is subject to a master plan, and there's certain things when a project's under a master plan that don't require a sketch plan.
Right. It's helpful to remind, and there's a great history permit history in this, in the board packet. I believe it's on page 2. But there's quite a long permit history of this project, a 2-decade-long permit history. Of course, we approved this final plat. So the question that I think that I have, and I'm sure others have, is why are we back here after this project's been approved? So maybe David or Adam could walk us through that, give us a summary before we step through some of the staff comments.
Very good. Again, Dave Marshall. In this particular case, what we were looking to do was to preserve the original intent of this particular project. The original, excuse me, I need to, there we go. Sorry. Too much feedback. All right, let's do this over again. So I wanted to bring a little bit of perspective in regards to, again, all the things that you went through, recent approval and the original intent of the directives that came out of the environmental court. But one of the primary concerns of the development of this particular area was that it did represent one of the highest points of the city. It was treed. And the concern is that the character of this particular area would be significantly reduced with a proposed subdivision. The applicant heard that and prepared plans. This is dating back to the early 2000s. That was a very aggressive plan that created a significant amount of plantings around the perimeter of the site, where we were looking to again create a curtain of screening for the proposed lots, as well as making sure that we retained, especially on the high point of the land, a significant portion of the trees so that we did not see this particular canopy of trees ultimately disappear. So to orient you on this plan, thank you, Delilah, as far as what you have before you, this is the currently proposed plan. And prior to this, there was one that was previously approved. On this plan, on the far top left is Golf Course Road. And as you move from the left of the plan to the right, you're moving in the northerly direction. What you see here is a traditional city street with a cul-de-sac. That's called Long Drive. And then there is an appendage off that, which is a private road, also called Long Drive, that ultimately comes to the very end where there's a hammerhead turnaround and the termination of that particular private driveway itself. The application before you tonight is associated with Lot 6. It's the most northerly lot. And in this particular case, things to understand is that just to the west, or just up on where you had the pointer, actually there are no trees at all. So one component of this particular, the current approval, calls for trees to be planted on the westerly portion of that lot, as well as on the open space or the open lands immediately west of that. The idea is to basically create a curtain that was going to create an envelope around the entire project. So here on lot 6, you will see that particular feature where there's supplemental trees beyond what was out on the property prior to the first application. This is also going to be true on the far southerly end on lot 7, but we'll focus on lot 6 tonight. And one of the challenges with regard to this particular program of retaining as many trees as possible within the forested area was to also at the same time figure out how to get roads into here and to also provide an appropriate, not an excessive, but an appropriate amount of clearing to enable home to be placed. And what you see here is, well, if you had gone through all of the application materials, you would have seen the originally approved concept building locations. But underneath it all, they really are regulated by the front, rear, and side yard setbacks, but further regulated by the tree preservation plan that is intended to, again, maintain the character of this particular area. So today we come before you with the first of probably what will be some future requests where trying to fit a proposed building footprint within exactly the originally drawn ones from 2002 is going to be very challenging. Buy a lottery ticket, you might find somebody who will be able to fit exactly in there, but what we really want to understand, and I think Marla did a nice job summarizing, is that the intent of this particular tree preservation program was to basically create this envelope, maintain the envelope around the outside, but also maintain the canopy up above. So with that being the background, our applicant, Adam Hergenrother, has come forward with a proposed building in this particular site. He's met with staff many times, discussed this particular project, and it continues to evolve even beyond what you have before you tonight. So with that being the background, what we're proposing to do is to do a best fit for a home within this particular tree protection area, with the understanding that on the west side, or the top part of lot 6, there are no trees, and the original proposal had called for trees to be both on lot and off lot. And this applicant is proposing to do the exact same thing, but to look for some flexibility in the middle of the lot with regard to tree preservation, tree replacement, and tree locations. So that is the intent. What we have further gleaned from the staff report is that some of the things, some of the hoops that I think all applicants are going to be obligated to pursue or to comply with is the program of tree, I'm going to call it a tree area, because every lot or every area around a lot requires that you either retain trees or plant trees, and that when all is said and done, the treed area should be the same between the proposed conditions and what is currently permitted today. So in this particular case, the applicant comes before you with a plan to modify the tree locations, to remove 2 trees. There is some ambiguity in the application materials, but we will go back to that, and to basically supplement that with additional trees on the west side of the site, with the intent of, again, making sure that the screening on that west side is as robust as the original approval, but actually even more robust with additional plantings. So that is the framework. What Delilah is bringing up today is the view out of that particular west side of the site. Again, there were no trees there. There are some trees out on the edge of the golf course itself. So what you're seeing here is a westerly view that goes through tall meadow grasses that transition into trees adjacent to the golf course playing area, and then the light color grass behind the trees is the actual fairway and rough areas, and then beyond that are the homes that occupy the west side of that particular golf course. So that's a perspective, again, what is the existing condition, and that's again primarily because there were no on the north side of the building envelope, we'll call it, and that the only way to screen a building was to basically put in new trees. Now, the trees that you see in this particular photo, they're not being proposed to be removed. What we're looking to do is to supplement everything between this proposed building footprint and that western edge of the development area.
Hey, Delilah, can you, or Marla, can you throw up like SK1 or SK2 that I sent over? I think it'll help provide an illustration for kind of what we're doing. We're not actually asking for a rear wave setback. I emailed Marla after that and just removed that. Really, and thanks, Dave, for jumping in there and explaining that background, because it's a complicated project from 2001 to where we are today. But if you actually look at the supplemental proposals, first of all, it was very kind of a little unclear on what we needed to submit. So we would kind of work through that. And I got Marla what I think is a very clean package on Friday, working with Dave. And you can see, basically, we're just trying to orient the house a little bit differently. In the actual, when you pull up SK1 or SK2, which is what was submitted on Friday, it'll show it pretty easily if you have that up there. If not, I can share my screen and probably pull it up if you want.
I'm going through what's in the packet. So
Yeah, it was sent on.
Yeah, it should be in the supplemental, Delilah.
okay, then give me a moment.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, she was set up, Adam
Yeah.
and David. interrupt. So we approved this late last year, right? And then, and I want to disclose that I did happen to be walking through that area, and I about 2 months ago. What stage of construction is this project in right now?
Yeah.
How many permits have been pulled?
We have the infrastructure permit, and we're building the roads out and utility lines right now.
Okay, and some of the trees have been cleared already.
Yeah,
correct?
all the trees that need to come down were cleared. And we took all those down that were approved clearing. So it's out there. So yeah, the reason why, and it's a little complicated, is not really complicated, but just understanding it, is that there's these pre-established little footprints, and what SK1, SK2 will show you is we just want to orient that, you can see it so it fits better up with the driveway location coming into it. The approved building envelope that was approved back in 2010 was basically 4,135 square feet of proposed structures. We're actually proposing 3,887 square feet of proposed structures. There's 2 pine trees that are in the front of the lot, or the front of the house. There's 3 pine trees in the front of the house that have no indication or have no bearing on screening or anything. So the request would be to remove those 2 that are preventing a driveway from coming in there, and relocating and putting more trees on the west side of the property, for not only for my protection for the house that's going there, but also for the neighbors, of creating that screening that's there as well too. There's actually, Matt, a higher point too, that where the original trees were proposed. If you actually go up onto the property behind it with Jim's property, it gives you an additional elevation gain, as you can see where those trees are as well too, kind of spreading that out.
And when you say screening, you're talking about the homes on Golf Course Road, their back deck looking into that project, right?
That's exactly right. This is lot 6 is the only one that has 0 trees behind it. So it's kind of, it has right now, if we were to when we first put the house in there, there's going to be 0 screening. That's the way it's always been. Nothing's been removed behind there. There just was never any trees. I took that picture of me standing in the middle of the lot, right behind those pine trees. Basically where those dead pine trees are dropped is where the house would be. So you can see there's 0 screening. So we're just looking to relocate the screening back a little bit where all those other trees are, providing a little higher elevation to prevent more screening and reorient the house a little bit. If that makes sense.
Yep. Okay. Maybe now would be a good time to step through these. Again, there's a detailed history of this project in the packet, and I recommend people read it. But item number 1.
I apologize. I'm not finding the drawing that you're referring to, Adam. I've looked in the folders that I have available to me.
Okay, Delilah, I can share my
I
screen.
need to
It's
stop
right
sharing
there, though.
screen
Just
so I
open
can
it
share
for a minute
this.
work.
Excuse me?
Do you want me to share my screen?
I'm going to stop sharing because it's not in the packet supplemental materials that I have. I've opened everything for this project in supplemental.
So not in the project, but in the
I have
packet
existing
supplemental.
conditions. Huh?
In the packet supplemental folder?
I have packet supplemental open. It only has 2 agenda items for number 4, and it's what I've already shown, existing conditions and the overlays.
Yeah, the overlays.
Well, I went there and I didn't find SK, the page he's talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'll open that again and see what I have. I have, okay. All right, it's there. Hold on.
Thank you.
Colors.
Yeah, it's got pretty colors on it.
Yeah, there's a lot of colors here. Hold on. Let me just get back to.
Because Matt, what you'll see is there's 2 plans here. One that basically addresses the first staff comment where Marla indicated that, to not remove the amount of screening that's proposed. There's one plan that keeps everything the same. This one you can see. Dave, maybe you want to walk through that a little bit, and you can kind of walk them through that real quickly. But this gives you a pretty good indication of what we're looking at here. Well, you're on mute, bud.
So SK1 has a lot of information on it. And maybe what we want to do is move to SK2 if we can, Delilah, and that will help us kind of focus in on the
There you go.
differences that's before and after. So I'm going to have everybody focus on the green lines that are just above the Lot 6 call out. The Lot 6 call out in the middle of this particular drawing is also within the proposed building footprint. The dashed black line, sorry, I'm going to take a step back. The dashed black line represents the conceptual building footprint that was shown on the original plans, or I'll call them the approved plans. And the blue line represents the rotation or the proposed footprint, which has been rotated slightly. So generally, it's the same area, some encroachments, but actually some areas that are less in regards to that particular area. And actually, technically, when you include all the structures, it's less square footage than what the original rectangle showed. However, what I wanted to bring your attention to is moving up on this particular plan, which is westerly. The green line represents the original beginning of those imported tree planting area. And as you move up, look for another green line that's north of this property line that runs north-south. And that particular line represents the western limit. Thank you. That's good. That shows the western limit of the originally imported, I'll call it, proposed planting screen. This particular application seeks to move those green lines to basically where the red hatched line is. So it basically moves it westerly, and it's still the same number of trees. Actually, it's 2 additional trees on that particular westerly screen. Again, to basically make sure that those views for the people looking across the golf course into this particular area, this house will be screened similarly to how the other homes within this particular subdivision will be screened, but theirs will rely primarily on existing trees to do that, the retention of existing trees. So here, again, on the western edge, we basically have created a little bit more open space around the building, but in essence have moved the approved landscaping palette of trees further to the west to facilitate this particular area. So unlike applications where this was all existing trees and we're asking for the removal of trees, there are none today in that westerly direction. So we felt comfortable that this particular proposal would still achieve the intent of maintaining the screen around the entire planned unit development, or I'll call it the subdivision. And this is one of the proposals that we have before the board to understand with the retention of the proposed trees and supplementing of that, but the relocation, whether that was going to be acceptable as part of the tree management plan. So the irony here is that there are specific requirements for tree retention, but in this particular case, all we're doing is we're not changing that tree retention on the west side, we're just moving the proposed plantings.
So all of the, as I understand it, all of the trees that were as in the tree management plan, the original approved final plat, those have been removed already. Is that correct?
The ones that were approved to be removed, yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so moving this, just to summarize things, moving this driveway and shifting the house on lot 6, adding trees for screening also necessitates removing what in order to accommodate that driveway and moving the housing lot.
Actually, moving the house has no impact on the trees at all. The house just orients. Actually, Matt, you see that where it says approved driveway, the blue line there? That's actually the approved driveway. So all we're doing is we're matching the house to the actual approved driveway. You see what I'm saying there? If you actually see how the driveway would extend into like the corner of the proposed building envelope, which didn't really make sense. So we're just switching the house to kind of orient it to match up with the approved driveway.
Okay.
And then and I've added, there's a 3-bay garage there. So we added a little bit more garage there, which the garage on where that green line is requires the removal of those 2 pine trees right next to the house. And so then I said, all the in front of the house where it says like the approved hammerhead, there's a whole bunch of screening already in front of there. So removing those 2 trees right by the driveway there has 0 impact on people looking into the development or into that house from the other side, because there's a whole section of screening already there.
Okay. And just to further clarify, you're coming here, you're asking for the reorientation, you're changing of lot 6 and the road design, but no other lots, no other houses are affected by this change.
That's
in this-
100% accurate. What I will say is we obviously have a lot of community members who are interested in this development. We pretty much have them all sold. And as Dave kind of referenced to it, I know staff was trying to get clarity on whether or not they could in-house approve the orientation of some of these lots as long as it didn't impair the tree preservation plan or require any removal of trees. If that's something that they can do and have, so we don't have to come back here for every single one of these lots of these custom homes that we're building, that people want to orient their house to go outside of that input a little bit without obviously going above and beyond and clearing anything else, if that makes sense.
Well, I'd like to hear from Marla or Delilah about that. Is that how you see it? We're not gonna have to come back for every single building permit on this, are we? On a pre-approved PUD?
If the building is proposed to be within the approved tree or outside of the approved tree preservation area, they won't. But in this case, and we don't know on how many in the other cases, they're looking to relocate the tree preservation area shown on the plan that's on your screen in green. That will be for a subject for the board to review, because the decisions, the master plan and the final plat and everything that's referenced in the staff comments are very clear that the tree preservation area has a specific goal, and in cases where that's a gray area, kind of think of us as executors of the rules and you guys as interpreters of the rules.
But when it comes to the tree preservation plan,
Yeah, I'm not talking about moving any of that for any of the other lots. Yeah.
Yeah, Delilah, that one you just had
tree preservation plan every 6 months to whenever time a building permit, someone wants to build on a lot.
This one, Marla?
Yeah. So in this case, you can see the green areas where they're proposing to reduce the tree preservation area. So the green will be areas that are removed, and so it's a different color scheme than was up before. The green will be areas that are removed, and the blue will be areas that are added. And then, so this big, thick black line around the outside is total area of tree preservation. And there's these little pockets for each of the house lots within it. If, as Adam and his company go through and build on each of these lots, each of these homeowners wants to build outside of, or build or clear outside of that area that's not hatched.
Yeah, can I mention? Yeah, I 100% agree, Marla. If we were going to go outside any area that requires jumping into any of the tree preservation area, then absolutely. I'm talking about just the reorientation of the actual houses inside the approved area that we can build. Right.
So there would be no change. I mean, these are not intended, squares aren't intended to be, the house shall be square.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So when we don't even really need an approval on the orientation because we're not even outside the original footprint of that itself.
Right. What you're asking for approval for is not the house.
Exactly.
The change in the tree preservation area.
Yeah. So basically 2 trees being relocated and moving the preservation area back, but it's still the same amount of tree preservation area, Matt. It's just moving it back a little bit onto Jim's property, which he's perfectly fine with, and then the fence.
Adam, can you clarify that? Because in our analysis, it was quite a bit less tree preservation area.
Yeah, well, there's yeah, I did when I sent the other ones in there. If you look at SK2A, which you don't have to pull up, but you can see that in there. In the SK1, we added the red to basically make sure that we are allocating the preservation area outside of our lot in that lot so that it becomes the same.
I'm not sure I follow. Delilah,
we're just shifting.
I'll jump to it. Hold on a moment.
Okay. Thank you. We're just shifting some of the preservation area, which again, as Dave said, currently just doesn't exist, outside of the boundary of lot 6 onto Jim's property, which again, Matt, understand too, there's 17 trees being planted from lot 6 to on the back side of the property. So there's a whole bunch of trees going in there, right? And we just want to be able to allocate, see the proposed 2020 limits of offsite trees. We added that section down in there, the other section, the front part. So we were adding those things in. You can see the red line is where we could add that back in, and that equates to 1,517. It's kind of in a dark rating right there. 1,517 of additional coverage, as you can see it.
So can I just
So
ask
in
the,
this,
I just
Yeah.
want to ask the simple question here. So the green area that seemed like the tree preservation area that we are, the blue areas in the previous map is the new tree preservation area or the add to it. And the green is what's being taken away. But in the green area, just because it's tree preservation area doesn't necessarily mean there's trees there as indicated in that photo. Do I have that right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So tree preservation area is a specific prescription for what can be done in that area. Within the tree preservation area, the only clearing that can be done is to remove dead, disease, damaged trees or invasive species. So it's basically intended to be an unmanaged area.
But if
But
there's
there's
no
no-
to be removed, why do we have to take it away? Am I missing
So
something here?
basically, it's taking away that restriction on the management. So if you were to remove an area from the tree preservation area, there would be it would be possible to remove volunteer trees, maybe some birch seedlings start up there. The idea, one of the things that was captured in the master plan decision is, recognizing that trees will be planted small, but they will grow up over time, and these protections in the tree preservation area will ensure that they grow up over time, and it becomes a robust buffer. By reducing the tree preservation area, you're reducing that buffer. So I think what Adam's showing here is a change from what was in the packet.
It was.
Which
It
is-
was. Yeah, is what we sent on Friday.
We're not, just to clarify, we're not cutting trees in all that green area. We are essentially saying that in 20, 30 years from now, we don't have to let trees grow there.
That's
Right?
exactly right.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Okay, is now the time to step through the comments? Is there anything else? I want to make sure I address the significant comments there. So I'll start with comment number 1. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to amend the proposal so that it does not reduce the overall area of no cut and does not otherwise detract from the purpose of the no cut area. Staff considers that if the applicant does this, the board may consider approving the application. If such a proposal is made, the board should review the remaining elements of the applicant's proposal, including the removal of some of the trees required to be preserved, relocation of trees proposed to be planted, reduction of the rear setback, and location of a fence in the common lands. Staff has only included a brief discussion of these issues below because staff considers them secondary to the issue of the tree preservation area. So is that, if I'm interpreting that comment correctly, Marlon, saying the concern is the overall area of tree preservation lost,
That's correct.
not commensurate with the tree preservation area gained?
Correct.
Okay, what does the applicant say about that?
Well, that's what Matt, you're looking at for SK2 was basically a plan that showed no loss of the actual tree preservation area.
Adam, could you walk us through that in a little more detail? Because I'm having trouble following it and I've had
Sure
a few
can.
days.
Yeah. Dave, you want to walk through that or you want me to?
Actually, I want to just provide a correction. SK2A actually
Sorry,
is the one that
There you go,
does.
yeah.
So what we're trying to do is recognize that both within Lot 6 as well as the areas to the west, that the intent was to have a certain amount of treed area. And that's what ultimately is identified in the top right of this particular plan. Delilah, I don't know if you can zoom in on that a little bit just to allow everybody to see that those numbers better. But up in the top right, it basically talks about the approved tree area. And on this particular lot in the areas immediately west, there was 11,266 square feet. Now, the proposal, the most recent proposal, had a total amount of treed area being retained of 9,750 square feet, which created a deficit of 1,516 feet. And that is something that staff had said that we really need to be very careful of if we want to basically not trigger more significant reviews of this particular application, and to make sure that the treed area as part of this proposal did not reduce the amount of total treed area below 11,266 square feet. You will see a darker red hatch area that is touching the westerly property line. Can we get a cursor on that?
Everyone can draw if you want to bring down drawing tools.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That's good. But yeah, if you can just, sorry, my finger doesn't work. But nonetheless, all we
talking
wanted
about
to do
this?
is recognize, yes, that area right there, that represents 1,517 square feet. And what we would propose to do is basically take the same number of trees, actually more than what had been approved on this west side, and spread them out so that this particular area is fully treed. It has a fully amount of treed square footage equivalent to the existing approval. And that would be the modification to the site plan that would achieve the no net loss in treed area. So I think that's very critical for this particular application to be more readily compliant with this particular area. And again, I guess I'll just leave it at that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to make sure I heard that correct. That is no net loss of area or of trees, treat areas or of trees.
Treed area. So that includes both existing trees as well as proposed trees. So
But
20 years from, sorry.
go ahead,
I'm
Don.
still not clear. I see a reduction of 1,500 square feet. I'm just having trouble connecting those dots. How is that
Yeah.
not less?
Well, it shows the original footprint. Then we went and modified that dark red is not added into that formula. So you see the dark red, it's got a little number, it says 1517 right above there. If I had to draw it on the top, on the top right of that right there, it says 1517.17. That's in addition to the square footage of the 9750, which if you add the 1517 plus the 9750, it puts you above the 11,266.
So you're essentially shifting
Yes,
some of
that's it's exactly right. It's all we're doing. There's no trees there. We're just shifting the plan back a little bit to provide a little bit more space for this. But there's no net loss in any of this. We're not asking for a rear setback waiver either.
And the pool that's there, is that for that community or just that house?
That's just for my house.
Oh, that's your house. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So when you said, I want to go back to something Dave said. He said that you're proposing to distribute trees in this area that you're adding back in. Have you provided a revised landscaping plan? Is that in this packet somewhere? With the overlays?
So, Dave Marshall here. We have not revised the landscaping plan to show this particular, what are we spelling? We'll call it the tree added area. So we have not provided that to you. This is a late revision to the concepts of at least the footprint of the treed area. And what we needed to do was demonstrate that we're committed to making sure that the total treed area is no less than what's approved today.
Well, because I think this is the key question that staff has indicated in the notes, I'd like to hear from everyone on the board before we move ahead. I mean, essentially the bargain is more trees, but a changing of the area where trees could grow. I'd like to hear from the other board members on this key point before we move on.
Well, I'd like to hear from Marla too.
Yeah, I'd like to ask specifically, in the staff report, it said that the area being lost was 2,592 square feet. And here in this drawing, it was 1,516 square feet. So there's a discrepancy of about 1,000 square feet. Marla or Delilah, can you account for that, please?
Do you want me to go back to the other plan, Marla?
Yeah, the one with the blue and the green shading. So that's where those numbers came from, that 2,000 square feet. I didn't have the advantage of the original CAD drawing, so I was just basing it on what I took off on the PDF. Dave, did you ever get to the root of why my numbers were so different than your numbers?
Well, let me answer the question this way, is that we took an extension beyond lot 6 in the westerly direction to identify what is proposed to be the treed areas. And that might have been the difference, Marla, between if you just analyzed lot 6 itself, that particular 2,500 number probably makes sense as far as the total difference. But when we go and move things in the westerly direction, plus with that darker red area, bring things in the easterly direction. I don't mean to confuse you, but we're very comfortable with these particular numbers in regards to where the approved values were and where we are today. And as I indicated when we first introduced the project, this has continued to evolve beyond just when the packet that was sent to you. So this is, we hate to say it's an evolving, moving target, but it is one that we are working to make it as compliant as possible within the intent of maintaining a perimeter envelope around this particular project.
So I apologize, Dave, for making you say it again, but I just want to make 100% clear. With SK2A, you are proposing no net reduction in the tree preservation area. Is that correct?
You're on mute, Dave.
I am. So as far as drawing SK-2A, that is the drawing that supports that statement. That's correct.
Okay, so into SK2A, there is no net reduction in the tree preservation area, meaning the square footage of the tree preservation area.
That's correct.
So in my opinion, and I'll let the board talk about it, in my opinion, if we are achieving that goal, I don't see any reason why we don't proceed. We're gaining more trees. We're no net reduction in area. If all this bears out, it seems like we should proceed. This is a beauty on a golf course, and we're getting more screening. So I think I'd be interested in continuing along. Yeah, but anyone else on the board have a concern about this?
It's John. I don't think I've got a concern, but it's just it's sort of a disconnect between trying to understand the confines of the project. The project was confined to these lots originally, but the project is really the whole golf course. And so I don't think it really matters, but that's where I keep having trouble is, okay, we're now on Jim's land with your project, and okay, I mean, it's all the golf course land, right? So I'm not sure it matters, but that's where I'm having a disconnect.
I'm sorry, who's Jim?
Jim McDonald.
The jam.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, Jim Goff. Okay, thank you.
Jam.
And John,
So-
too, the original approved project had a whole bunch of plantings already on Jim's property. So all we're doing, it's not like we're saying we're going to take all the trees in lot 6 and put them on Jim's property. There was already probably 20 trees being planted on there.
Adam, I understand.
Okay.
It's just
Thank you.
it's just a disconnect for me, and I get it.
Yeah.
I'm just having trouble with it. That's all.
Cool. All right. Thanks.
Actually, to defend John, it has typically been the city's process that you take care of your own landscaping on your own property. And so when you see a 10-lot subdivision, you say, well, all the landscaping needs to be on your parcel. This particular one's a little bit of a hybrid where, again, reviewed as part of the planned unit development of the entire golf course. These particular, there is a number of additional plantings on the golf course open space as opposed to on these lots. So it took even me a while to basically get my head around that particular fact. And we, at this particular case, because that was the means and methods of providing this particular screening concept, we basically are just kind of riding that horse right now.
Okay, so given that there's no net loss in tree preservation area, we're gaining trees, we're just shifting things around. I suggest, unless there's any other objections on the board, move on to question number 2.
Matt, can I make a quick point? I think that we still need to have a discussion when we get to that point in the staff comments about that moving trees around. I think we've settled the question of, they have a proposal to have no net loss, but we've not yet seen what they're proposing for that area to look like.
And I didn't mean to imply that. Thank you for clarifying that, Marla. And we need to see a landscaping plan that further defines that.
It won't, I mean, we can, but it really won't change much when it's already approved. I mean, from what the new landscaping plan, Marla, that I submitted with the original package will pretty much be able to cover all of that we're basically talking about. Maybe move a tree a foot or two over, but it's not much, which we can update and give to you when we need it. But it's not like we're moving trees like 17, 20 feet or anything like that.
Okay, let's move on to comment number 2. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant to describe what changes in factual or regulatory circumstance justify the proposed modification. I think we discussed that, but Marla, is there a finer point that we need to drill down on when it comes to staff comment number 2? Talking about the master plan.
It sounds like we can kind of skip the whole Stowe Highlands business
Yeah.
if there's no reduction in tree preservation areas.
Okay, so that gets us to what? Relocation of trees to be planted, which is item number 6. Staff recommends the board evaluate. Sorry,
Five.
go ahead. Oh, sorry, 5. Removal of trees required to be retained. The trees to be removed had a total size of 38 inches in 2003. The applicant appears to be proposing 2 trees with a total diameter of 5 to 6 inches to replace these 3 trees. Given the purpose of the agreements described above for the lots to remain wooded or become wooded. Number 5, staff recommends the board require the applicant to provide a more comparable replacement for the trees to be removed, and that those trees be required to be replaced on the same side of the lot as those that are proposed to be removed. What does the applicant say to that request?
It's 2 trees that are being asked to be removed, not 3. They're 2 pine trees. I'm more than happy to put them on that side of the lot, but honestly, Matt, it just makes sense to put it. There's on that front part where the driveway comes in, there's a whole bunch of screening and trees already on there. So it's basically just being redundant by putting trees there. It just makes more sense to add to screening in the back part of the lot where it needs screening. That's why in the updated landscaping plan, it shows the removal of those trees, putting more trees in the back part of the property to provide screening where it's necessary, keeping intent with the actual, the original intent of the project for the screening.
Now, of course, you could do both, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you want more trees in the front there.
The staff comment was not getting at the location of the trees, though I think that's an important consideration as well. And I think it's important that we take a look at sort of that overall plan and consider where lot 6 is relative to sort of the bulk of the development. There's no lot on the other side of lot 6. So removing trees from one side and putting them on the other does have an impact on the screening. But this staff comment was intended, in fact, to get at that we're removing a couple really big trees and putting in a couple really small trees. And is that really the way the board typically does this?
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I read that wrong. I mean, I interpreted it wrong. I read it right.
Yeah, you can see all the black dots in the front there. Those are all big existing trees that are going on there in the front part of it.
Right. So the trees to be removed had a total size of 38 inches in 2003.
If there was 3, there's only 2 though.
So
This is where Dave Marshall
and then the
comes in and
replacement
basically,
trees.
so I'm sorry, Marla, I'm just going to jump in and be rude. There's one particular diagram from the landscape architect that indicated all 3 of those pine trees to be removed. However, on sheet C 2.1, it only calls for 2 of the trees to be removed. One of the 3, the pod there, would be retained. So
you can see it right there.
That's the ambiguity in the drawings that are before you. So that's our fault. But nonetheless, for the record moving forward, the 2 trees that are south of the east of the number 6, one of those 2 is being retained.
I see. So the 3 trees, 2 you want to remove 2.
Yes, 3 and 4. They're actually labeled 3 and 4 right there.
There you go.
Okay, so trees 3 and 4 are relatively large white pines. And it looks like based on this plan, you're proposing a couple new trees that are in the range of 2.5 to 3.5 inch caliber. So, if we're talking about removing 38 inches or 24 inches of trees compared to adding 6 inches of trees. That's not really the way the board typically approves things, but you know, it's up to the board how they want to deal with it in this case.
Well, if we're moving him to the back, what, you know, I think the applicant would like to put more in the back, you know,
Yeah,
if we say
That's fine.
need them in the front, you need them in the back, you can get closer to the caliper that we're losing by adding them to the back. I understand the need for screening, and I don't think if you had
I'm
more-
perfectly fine with that.
Okay. Number 6, relocation of trees required to be planted. Staff recommends the board evaluate whether relocating trees from the house lot to the adjoining common land meets the purpose of the agreements to mitigate the impact of the approved tree cleaning. So this are still our 2 trees, and whether or not we're gonna replace those trees there or move those to the back.
So the
Marla, is that-
plan that Delilah has up now is actually the perfect plan. And I think that kind of this harkens back to our earlier conversation as well. You know, we're removing trees from the front, we're adding them in the back. Some of the trees, all of the trees basically are doing a big explosion away from the building. And some of those trees are actually moved from the house lot to the common lands. And then now with today's proposal, even more trees will be moved to the common lands. You know, they're going to add more tree buffer behind the proposed tree buffer. So is that consistent with findings of the master plan? Is it okay? Does it still meet the intention of creating this forested area appearance from elsewhere on the golf course by doing that?
I don't know, board, what do you think?
Yes, John, I think it does. I think the more you screen from the houses next door and from the golf course, and if we got more appropriate, I mean, it needs to be the right stuff. It can't be decorative trees, but you know, if it looks like the pine forest it is, then I have no problem with it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as long as in the future, and I know, Marla, you addressed this somewhere in your report that trees can't just be cut down so that people have a better view.
Absolutely not.
Right, well, that's part of the master plan decision.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here, in fact, because they're proposing to remove trees number 3 and 4, which are required to be retained. So that, going back to what we talked about really early, that would be another reason why the board might have to be involved in future lots. If any of those trees that in the master plan decision or settlement agreement are proposed to be removed, we'll be in front of the board again.
Okay. Sorry.
Delilah, do you think we could look at a plan that shows sort of the whole long drive development? I just want to make sure everybody's aware of where lot 6 is relative to the
Sure.
rest
Hold
of
on,
everything.
give me a moment.
And we don't even have to harp on it. I just want to make sure that, you know, we're not thinking this is surrounded on all sides. This is sort of the end lot. Sure, that one.
Hold
So
on,
lot
let me
6
just get
on the
to where I
right.
can scroll. How about that one?
Sure. Any? So lot 6 is on the right. It's sort of the far end, and it's not like it doesn't have a house across the street. So what we remove from the bottom of the page and put on the top of the page reduces the screening from things on the other side of that fairway. Golf course thing.
Yeah, it's a par 3 right there. But there is a whole bunch of screening already in the front of that. You can see all those black dots. So it's got nominal impact on that.
And will this be the first house built in this 11 unit subdivision?
Yeah, I will say we have 8 out of 10 of these sold, which is why Marla and I have become really good friends in this process for a lot of this, just because it's been a really, you know, going back and trying to untangle this since 2002 has been kind of interesting. And so I think that's why we're here, kind of just walking through a little bit of this, and I get to be a little bit of a guinea pig to kind of go through it. But
Yeah. Okay, but this would be the first that's ready for, okay.
Yeah.
All right. regarding the setbacks, Adam, did I hear you or
Yeah,
David? did
I don't
hear you
need-
right?
No, I don't need it. I'm not asking for it.
Okay,
That
so
one's
we're gonna-
easy. That
gonna
one's
skip
been
over that.
removed.
And go to 8, which is the location of the fence. Staff recommends the board consider whether a fence meets the purpose of wooded land at the outside edges of the property as defined by the above exerted master plan, preliminary and final plat decision.
I'll give you a 30-second background on where that came up. Marla and I worked a lot together. I was trying to buy the other piece that's the common piece of that from Jim to add on to my lot. And then when we started getting into it, Marla and I basically decided that it was going to be, really wasn't going to work that way. And so then we said, well, what are we trying to achieve? And it's basically for the protection of my kids. Nobody would have access coming from there unless it's off of the golf course, which is all white staked, which is kind of out of bounds anyways. So the only thing I'm looking to do is add a little in that section that's right there, that's wooded where that cursor is, where Delilah's pointing there, to add a little fence in that area to come back around to the front. Nobody would necessarily, it's not gonna go all the way on the front, but it's gonna come back in line with where the side of the house is, just to add a little bit additional area there. But the reason why that came up that way is because we tried to do a subdivision or a minor, lot line adjustment to add more to that. And we realized that it was going to be more complicated than it not. And then so we came up with the idea of just doing the fence.
So this isn't a black wrought iron fence. This is a, what is this that you
No,
proposed?
it's your standard black fence that you would see all throughout the golf course right now.
Oh, okay.
I have 3 kids under 8, and it'd just be nice to be able to have them so that I don't have to worry about people running up onto that property, because that does come real close to the lot line, and for dog purposes and stuff like that would be great.
Board, do you have any opinion on that?
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I see it as more of an agreement between him and Jim. It's not, I don't think it has much to do with us.
I'm fine with it.
So staff's position on this was, this is common land. These lands have very strong and specific restrictions on what can and cannot be done there. To change the jurisdiction, even superficially within that common land, may erode the protection afforded that area under the master plan settlement agreement. If there's a fence, what's to say, well, we're just gonna clear out some of the underbrush. And if we clear out some of the underbrush, maybe the kids want to build a treehouse. And maybe once the kids build a treehouse, maybe we should put the shed out there too. And it's not just this property, right? If all of these properties start saying, well, we're gonna put fences out in the common land, and it's real hard to say no to, project number 2 when we've said yes to project number 1. Where are we with this common land? And is that master plan settlement agreement that we worked so hard on for 2 decades really worth its weight?
But is the distinction I'm trying to figure out, the fence isn't on the common land, is it?
Yeah.
It is on the common land, not on the lot?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but I think you were proposing.
Yeah, no,
that
the
as
fence
lot
on the
6.
lot you can do without anybody with DRB, though it would go onto that part of that common land that's over there. But the common land, it's common land, but nobody has access to it, because you'd have to go through my property to access it. So
Is it
nobody
possible-
can use the common land,
Or you'd be walking off the golf course onto it,
which is out of bounds. Exactly. So that's the point. And
which is
yeah,
private property.
exactly.
But then what if somebody wants to put a fence back here or back here?
Well, those are wetlands back in that area, so you're dealing with a different type of thing. I mean, we go into all sorts of hypotheticals. I mean, what if somebody wants to put a fence or build anywhere as anybody's property? I mean, Jim would have to approve it. Jim's not necessarily going to do it. Jim would have to give that grant, that permission, period. I just got permission from him because we've been working together on a lot of these projects up there. It's not like he's going to go and grant that permission anyways to all these different people and all these hypothetical situations that we're coming up with. And again, Marla, and as you guys know too, there's a tree preservation plan. I can't just go cut down trees that are in that area. You are able to remove, invasives or trees of a certain caliber and size that are there, but there's nothing. It's not like I'm going to be going there and clear cutting anything. It's purely for the fence, as I explained to begin with.
Is it not possible to put the fence on your property? Something froze.
Yeah, Adam, I think we lost you.
I heard you going.
His picture is frozen on my screen.
Jim, do you know the answer to that? I mean, Dave,
David?
do you know the answer to that?
At this point, I'm not familiar with anything that would preclude it from being placed on his property.
Okay,
Well,
there he's
we
back.
don't,
Can you hear
we-
us?
Adam, we lost you for a bit.
All right,
Maybe
sorry
you
about
wanna-
that.
Oh,
Sorry,
you're
I'm
back.
back.
So
So
Adam,
Don-
the question was, why wouldn't you, to keep this cleaner, put the fence on the very edge of your property?
Well, I can certainly do that. I mean, again, I was just trying to provide a little origin to this. I had created a plan to do a minor lot line adjustment to acquire some of that land. And we worked through that with Marla and staff and realized that that probably wasn't the best alternative to do. And so working with staff over the last couple of months, we basically said, what's the intent? And then I think Marla and I had the idea of just putting a fence around that area. I mean, I came up with the idea and they said that would obviously work a lot better. And that's where it came up with. I just don't understand what's the issue with not being able to do that, considering nobody has access to that and it's just sitting there. It also protects people from coming in there off the golf course that are in there, coming into the property with 3 kids and a dog, having a little bit more space to be able to do it.
Well, that's a good
Well,
point.
that's
It's
not a good.
Melissa. Is it
No, no.
possible to do plantings instead of fencing?
Sure. If it's a huge deal, it's not a big deal.
No, my
yeah.
question is that we designed this as common land. Is it common land for the people that own homes in this 11 lot subdivision? Or is it common land for anyone that has a golf course membership and can walk the cart paths and walk into that land? What I guess I don't know the background of that.
It's part of the tree preservation area, which is to remain mostly undisturbed and as natural as it can be.
I see.
That's why, Melissa, in answer to your questions, adding other plants would not, it's very specific that you're supposed to retain what's there and not add to it artificially.
But it's not off limits to dogs and people, other than the fact that it's still private property.
It is private property. Dave, does anybody have access to that? I don't know the answer to that.
I know that the golf course is obligated to open its operations to the public in the wintertime for cross-country skiing. And there's designated number of parking spaces at the clubhouse that support that during the wintertime. But beyond that, this is a curious open space management plan where we don't have many type of commercial uses basically occupying the open space of a subdivision. So this is a different bird. And that's why it's very interesting, the fact that golfers with carts and all sorts of things going on in this particular open space. It's not the classic open space that we may be used to, but it is obviously a very active use area with regard to the open space component. So I'm not sure if I can add much more to it than that.
I have no problem with the aesthetics of a fence or any of that. I'm just concerned with the fairness. Well, if Adam could do it, why can't we do it? That would be my issue with it.
But if I own lot 2, I can only ask for permission to build on lot 2. I can't ask for permission to build on common space. Adam's in a different position. Do I read that right? Than someone who you sell a lot to?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You would have to ask and get permission and buy or an easement or something like that off Jim to be able to do that.
Right, and you're saying that you have, and there's
Yes.
nothing to prevent another person from doing the same. The buyer of lot 2 from doing the same, or the buyer of lot 9, God forbid, which is that whole big green space in the crook of the recreation path there, or the cart path there, from putting a fence around that whole thing.
Yeah, they'd have to come back to the board, but yeah, I get your point.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand.
All right. Well, unless there's any more questions about fencing, that's it we have for for
So
staff
it feels
comments.
like we need to continue to get some cleaned up plans that include what the landscaping is proposed to be with the revised tree preservation area. And then
Yeah, I'm gonna ask for public comments, but after that, I agree with you, Marla, that
Okay.
we're not quite ready to close this. So I want to acknowledge that I have received a public comment from Beth Zigmund, MD, and I won't read it. It's 4 or 5 paragraphs, but it is part of our packet, and it has some concerns about the views from the 11th hole. Additionally, I've received a number of comments from Michael Mittag, a series of questions. I will also, he may have answers to those questions. If not, I'll make sure they get answered. But I'll also give an opportunity for anyone to make additional comments in the chat box or to make a comment by saying their name. If you say your name, I'll write down and we'll address as many people that say their name, and then I'll give you 3 minutes to offer your view on this final plat application. So if you have a public comment regarding this application, please say your name at this time. Okay, I'm not hearing any right now.
Can you hear me?
I can. Who is this?
This is Beth Zigmund. I'm the one that submitted that letter.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, how are you? I remember the letter being about 3 paragraphs, by the way, and you're free to read it if you'd like. I live on Golf Course Road, 338 Golf Course Road, and I look at this small stand of trees from the back of my house. And it's my understanding that I have a couple things to say, actually. It's my understanding that the purpose of I recently moved here and I'm not familiar with the history of this case, but I did read over the application that was submitted tonight. And what I understood from the history of this parcel and what happened in the courts was that there were very specific rules set determining what had to be done to screen the houses that were going to be built on that property. And I can tell you that even the trees that were pulled down this spring created a line of sight from my house, which is on the 11th hole, to the 12th hole, which is on the other side of the plot of land. And that I can see with the trees full of foliage. So I can see straight through to the other side of that piece of land. So to say that if you take down 3 large mature pine trees and replace them with saplings is going to create the same sort of screening is simply false. I also read in the application that several trees were going to be, quote, relocated. I'm curious what is meant by relocated. Does that mean there's going to be compensatory planting? If so, where would the compensatory planting be? And I'm actually wondering if this is a violation of the plan that was set out to such a degree that it could actually invoke some sort of legal action, because it seems to me like it's a violation of what was set forth in the plan. The other thing I'd like to say is that if it's considered acceptable to simply come to the DRB and ask if you can put a fence on property that you don't own, I would posit that that is a very dangerous precedent to set, particularly on a property like this, where there is a very large amount of land surrounding these properties that's supposed to be considered common ground. As several people, I think, pointed out, what's to stop any one of these residents from deciding that they want to basically extend their property line by coming to the DRB and asking if they can put a fence in? I live, as I said, on 338 Golf Course Road, and there is a very pretty meadowy strip that's technically on the golf course, just on the east side of my property. And it, frankly, I think it would be absurd for me to come to the DRB and say I'd like to put a fence there and basically, acquire land that doesn't belong to me by getting approval from a local board to put up a fence. So, I mean, maybe that's the way things are done here, but it sounds like it's really pushing the bounds of what ought to be legal, in my opinion.
Well, you could just scrap the fence. We don't need I don't need it. It's fine. Yeah, just take that off the table.
Yeah, and I think you should scrap it personally.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Beth, for your comments. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that has a public comment? Please say your name. Okay, is there any other question that the board has for the applicant or the staff for the applicant before I entertain a motion to continue? Marla, Adam, David, what would be an appropriate time to come back with information that we could?
Well, could I just make one comment, Matt, that the proposed relocation plan is already essentially done. It's included in that original packet. So it's just.
You're talking about, so you're suggesting that that we have all the information that we need to deliberate on this. So okay, let me ask Marla. Do you feel like you have all the information that you need to check this up?
I'm concerned that we don't understand what is happening in the compensatory tree preservation area.
If you look at there's a tree preservation plan that shows the relocation of those trees, and to answer the neighbors' comments, they're all within a couple of feet of where they originally were. And they're all in that whole area. And you can see that in the original packet that we had is the relocation of the trees themselves.
So the board, as the board knows, I'm just saying this for the benefit of the public, the board is required to approve a specific plan. They can't say, you know, we require you to put more caliper trees to replace those that have been taken down, or we require you to put trees that more resemble a natural forest. It has to be specific. So if, you know, they want to say something like, please add one additional white pine 6 feet east of this other white pine, that's an acceptable condition, but there can't be any sort of generalities. So if the board is inclined to direct the board, which I think I heard they are, to sort of beef up the landscaping in that compensatory tree preservation area, they need to have that shown to them before they can make a determination on it.
In other words, we may have solved the fence issue. We may have solved the setback issue. And I think I heard you say affirmatively, Adam, that you agree that perhaps more to make up for the loss of caliper, that more trees are necessary. We got to know where they're going so we can decide whether or not to approve this project. Do I have that right, Marla?
Right.
When can we get that?
The earliest we have room on the agenda is July 21st, which is 2 meetings hence. For July 21st, I would need any revisions by July 15th.
Adam, David, can you do that?
Well, we can do that. It takes 2 minutes. The problem is I really wanted to start the house on this. So let me ask this question, if the board's okay with it. Is obviously the house itself, it fits within the requirements that there. And then you see what I'm saying, Dave? Like we can just start, I don't know how you pull the permit, and then if we happen to get it, we happen to push it back. If not, the house fits within the same requirements that are already approved. So so basically if it was denied, it wouldn't change the house at all. Because
Right.
none of that's planted at all or anything like that. I just don't want to wait that long.
You're going to build this house. We get it. We
Yeah.
just, you're asking for something and we're asking for something, and we need to put it in writing and approve it, or else you're building your original approved project. And so that'd be a question for Delilah or Marla, of what they can and can't do, but we can't proceed unless we have,
I got it.
a full plan, and we're not there yet.
Okay.
So, Delilah, you probably are better equipped to answer this, but if the home can be built without removing 2 trees that are required to be retained and without modifying the tree preservation plan, they can pull a zoning permit and then continue to proceed with this approval for modifying the tree preservation area and modifying the trees to be retained. The problem becomes, if you damage those trees that are required to be retained as part of the construction, then you're subject to all the repercussions that are described in the plan.
And I would be issuing the permit based on the approval from 2018.
Yeah.
Right.
Permit would be based on the 2018 subdivision approval.
Cool.
Right, and
Got
so
it.
you're under no obligation, Delilah, correct me if I'm wrong, to approve a building that has like a driveway that works, right? Because I think Adam's part of his reason he needs to remove those trees is the driveway doesn't work with those trees in place.
Yeah.
So you don't, it doesn't matter to you if he sets himself up for failure, because all he's doing is approving a building and you don't actually
Well,
have
the driveway still works. It would just be a little bit short. It'd be a little bit less wide. That's the only difference. It would still,
Okay,
it still
so-
work. Yeah.
So you could proceed with a zoning permit application for the building without any modifications to this, and you can proceed on a parallel track
Okay, got it.
proposing to modify the tree preservation area and remove those 2 additional trees and propose additional plantings.
Perfect.
So let's,
So do you agree with that statement?
sorry.
And then finding the driveway at a later date or doing whatever this approves would be what that following permit would be based on, yes.
So I would, given that, regardless, I would move that we continue final plat application SD 2019 to July 21st. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Don. Roll call. Brian Sullivan,
I,
Don Philipper,
Aye.
Jim Langdon. Jim Langdon. John Wilking.
John had to bow out. He wasn't feeling well.
Okay, Alyssa Portman
I,
and Mark Bear.
Mark
Mark,
isn't,
Oh, right, we lost Mark as well. Wait,
Chair votes aye. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Did I count that right?
that was four ayes, yes.
4 ayes. We haven't had an issue with this with the Zoom and someone taking a water break.
yeah, we know that actually Mark, during the deliberation after you left, said that he wasn't going to be able to sign back in. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. And John just sent us a message saying that he had to go. He wasn't feeling well. So
So
we're
Jim
down to 5 as
yeah.
soon as we find Jim.
I see that Jim is still, his line is still there, but I don't know, maybe like you said, he stepped away.
Hold on, I'll text him.
Although he calls in as well, right? He's,
Right.
I don't see I see a caller too. I don't know if that's him.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we
Hey,
got you.
Rob.
We got you.
So, Jim, we made a
Yeah,
motion. We made a motion to
I
continue.
heard it and, yeah, I heard
Okay.
it and said, I'm not sure why you couldn't hear me, but
Okay,
I
good.
can now.
So the final plat is continued to July 21st by a vote of 5-0-2. Okay, thank you very
All right.
much, Adam.
Yep. Thanks,
All right.
guys. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so moving on, we're going to open up 3 agenda items at once. Is that all right, Marla?
Yes, please.
That's Attended, please. Okay, so we're going to up agenda items 5, 6, and 7. SB 2002, SB 20020, 64 Aiken Street, SB 20021, 96 Aiken Street, and MS 2003 at 1840 Spear Street. Who is here for the applicant?
I am Robin Jeffers, and I believe that Dave Marshall from CEA is also here.
Dave Marshall's here.
Dave's on a frequent flyer plan tonight. Okay. Robin Jefferson, David Marshall, and David, were you on this before forgive me, on this site plan application prior? I know Robin's been sworn in. I'm just trying to make sure we get you.
Yes,
You
I
have,
was.
right? Okay, just want to confirm. Okay, so you're all sworn in. Tell us a little bit about, we were here on May 19th, and now we're back to answer a couple of small issues or big issues. But we narrowed down the remaining issues to discuss. I can read them real quick unless you have some notes to preface it, but dimensional requirements. Staff considers unclear if the coverage is calculated for the entire master plan area or the SEQ-NR portion of the project. If for the entire master plan, the applicant is in fact over their allowable coverage, and the board should not grant the waiver for this lot. If 13.9% is only for the SEQ-NR area, staff considers the board may grant the requested waiver for this lot. So David, Robin, you want to address that comment?
Can I jump in, Matt?
Sure.
Couple errors in that, and I did speak to Robin and Dave earlier today about this. So the first error is that second place where it says 13.9 in red. It actually should say 14.9, because that's what they're testifying that they are at. And then the other correction is the overall approved coverage in MP 0502 was 13.09, but there was a condition, I'm going to say way too many words, that be updated. The updated number is 15.3. So that was one of those things where the board, let me give an analogy. Say the board says you have to add 2 trees to your landscaping plan, and then you approve a landscaping budget, and then your condition says, and you have to update your budget. It was like that for coverage. So basically the updated coverage is 15.3%. So that's what the approved coverage is. So they're at 14.9, and
Making 15.3.
they can get up to 15.3. So they're not in fact over.
So we're okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Moving on. Fire department comments. The
Robin,
applicant is-
Dave, did you have anything else you wanted to say about that?
Nope, you
No, I think
summed it. Thanks
good.
for working together.
Okay, fire department comments. The applicant has obtained written approval from the fire department that the fire truck turning movements are acceptable. The applicant has agreed to locate a hydrant on the same side of the street as the proposed building. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant to clarify where the hydrant will be located and whether they are proposing to not construct one of the hydrants on the other side of the street to allow for a clear condition of approval to be written.
The drawing that you're looking at on the screen shows where the new hydrant will go. And the call outs there describe the water main essentially is on the right-hand side of the road. The new hydrant's going on the left, which is what the fire department asked for. At the last application, we discussed wanting to keep it on the right-hand side because that's where the water main is. The fire department said no. We said, okie dokie, we'll put it where you want it. And so we're all agreed.
Okay, so does the plan have to be updated or is it accurate now?
It's accurate.
Okay, and that's it. And that's it for MS 2003 as well.
Correct.
Are there any questions the applicant has for the board or the board has for the applicant at this time before I go to a couple public comments?
Matt,
Okay, yeah,
question.
go ahead.
Brian. So I'm remembering back to when they were first in on this project. And I thought we had heard that we were going to be taking testimony from Champlain Housing Trust. Did that happen and somehow I missed it? Was it submitted in writing or what became of that?
I don't recall Champlain Housing Trust ever having anything to do with these two buildings on this part of the project.
I think it had to do with inclusionary, the part of South Village that has inclusionary housing.
Right, these two buildings are not part of the proposed affordability plan that was approved 2 hearings ago. This is a separate piece. We will be coming in for those lots that are going to be under the affordability plan. Hopefully, if we're lucky, on the July 21st agenda. That'll be up to Marla, but probably after that.
Brian, was it perhaps, I think they were on this, one of the same evenings that Hillside at O'Brien Farm was on, and there was talk of CHT with their application?
That's
Was-
correct.
Housing in their application?
Yes, there was
Okay.
one,
It may have been. It
there
may
was a
have been.
multi-unit building.
Was this the one we were looking at this criteria under the interim zoning? Or was that the O'Brien farm as well?
That was O'Brien.
Okay, all right, that clears it.
This was the density bonus and the, yes, right, in the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there anyone, either in the chat box or that would like to make a comment in public? You can either write in the chat box or just simply say your name. Okay, I see nothing in the chat box. I couldn't hear anyone say their name, staff, for a public comment, so I would entertain a motion that we close SB 2002, SB 20020 Aiken Street, SP 20021 96 Aiken Street, and SP 2003 of 1840 Spear Street. Do I have
I'll
a second?
I'll
Seconded
second.
by roll call. Brian Sullivan,
Aye.
Don Philibert,
Aye.
Jim Langdon,
Aye.
John Wilking is absent. Alyssa Portman,
Aye.
Mark Bear is still absent, and Matt Cota votes aye. So 5-0-2, and thank you, Robin and Dave. I'm sure we'll see you a little bit later.
Thank you, staff on the board.
Bye, Robin.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Now we go to agenda item number 8. Agenda item number 8, which is SD 2018 at 1226 Dorset Street. This is River's Edge, final plat application. And who is here for the applicant?
David Burke is here, but oh, hold on. I might be able to get the camera.
Hi, David.
And Dan Heil with O'Leary Burke as well.
Hey, Dan. Anyone else on your team, David and Dan?
No, no. I think Tom Shepard and Paul Brogna might have been. I don't know if you can stream this one, but usually they don't. Usually they don't talk.
Okay, well, could I ask David and Dan to raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
I do.
Excellent. And before we start, just want to remind all those that are listening or watching that this is a final plat application. Within the last 6 months, the DRB reviewed a sketch plan and provided oral guidance to the applicant. We have also received a preliminary plat application at a formal hearing and offered further guidance and provided an opportunity for the public to comment. This is the beginning of the final stage of the review for the DRB. We're here to ensure conformance with applicable land development regulations. After hearing from the applicant, staff, and public, we may choose to continue the meeting for a later date. If there are questions that remain to be examined, future date will be announced prior to concluding. We may also vote on whether to close this hearing at the conclusion of tonight. And once closed, we'll issue a decision on the application. The decision will be mailed to the applicant and those who identify themselves as interested persons. If no appeal of the board's decision is made within 30 days, the decision is final and the applicant may proceed with the project. Okay, so this is final plan application. Tell us a little bit about what has changed since we last saw it at preliminary plat before I step through the comments. David or Dan, whoever wants to go ahead.
Sure, I'll be probably doing most of the talking, and Dan will jump in if I misstate something or if it's in detail, as he did a lot of the most of the work. The outline is an April 24th, 2020 letter. You know, as far as the follow up from preliminary, and preliminary went pretty well. The main follow up in this was some of the gas layout, the Green Mountain Power layout. The former landscaping plan was scrapped and TK Landscape Architect was hired. So the landscaping was completely redone. We did about a week ago meet with about 6 of the owners from Highlands, which is across the 18th fairway, just to meet out at the site and go over things. So essentially it was cleanup from preliminary, with the main thing being the landscaping.
Can I ask, because this often happens in my, as I get older, I'm trying to remember specific details, and perhaps someone on the board or Marla or Delilah or David or Dan could remind me. As I looked through this project and I saw the curb cut on Dorset Street, was that a decision we made at preliminary plat based on guidance from Public Works, or is that something that the applicant wanted?
We,
can someone chime in there?
goes all the way back to sketch, Matt. We submitted initially with a cul-de-sac coming off of Folsham. Planning and zoning staff got a hold of us. We met with them. The gist of that conversation was, we understand you're per the 2003 regs. We would like you to consider striving as much as you can towards the current version. And the other part was the roadway. The follow-up to that meeting was both the Public Works and the Fire Department strongly wanted the connection. And so the connection has shown for a while. It was part of the preliminary submission, preliminary approval.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Yep.
Okay. Is there anything else before I start with the comments?
No, well, I guess as far as the rest of this process, the state wastewater permit's been received, the stormwater permit's been received, the construction general permit's been received. The Act 250 minor is on public notice right now. It's waiting for the issuance of the pending wetlands permit, and also issuance of the town approval. Final town approval.
Okay. All right. So if it's all right with the board, I'd like to step through the comments. Number one, dealing with coverage. Maximum building coverage is 15%. Maximum lot coverage is 30%. The applicant is proposing 14.6 lot coverage and 28% lot coverage. At preliminary plat, the board required the applicant to propose a methodology to ensure the building and lot coverage not to be exceeded through the development in the future. The applicant has not yet provided such a proposal. Given how close the applicant is to the maximum coverages, staff recommends the board require the applicant to provide a draft notice of conditions that includes a proposed methodology to ensure the maximum lot and building coverages are not exceeded for the development as a whole after parcels are conveyed to individual property owners, such as when the owners wish to construct an addition. Staff recommends the board require this prior to closing the hearing. Is this agreeable to the applicant?
Well, we made a mistake, Matt. So we were showing that we were under the 15% and 30% coverage for the parcel. But the 2003 settlement agreement, as you heard in that earlier meeting, it's for the whole of Vermont National. So the 15% and the 30% is a number for the whole of Vermont National, and they're at about half of each of those numbers. So we don't feel, well, one, our mistake. We did send an email, a late email, Monday to Marla with a couple items. One of them was on comment 1 stating that per the settlement agreement, that's where the 15 and 30% is for the overall Vermont National. And I think they're around 7% and 14%. They're about at half of each.
So in other words, you if this was just this project, you'd barely make it, but when you consider that the settlement agreement is the entire project, you're well under, and thus you're asking us not to require that methodology.
Well, I think it's a given because the 2003 settlement agreement states that. It's so again, it was our mistake to go down the road of looking at this project individually.
Marla, is that your interpretation of the settlement agreement? Do we have that right?
Matt, I'm going to say pretty much the same thing you said. As I get older, my memory for the details of these things fades. I think that I just need to look into it. I can't answer off the top of my head.
I do have it in front of me, and I can recite a little bit of it. So on item findings of fact 1C2, it talks about the combined area of Vermont National Country Club PUD, subject to the master plan, approximately 435.37 acres. And then down on C5, the maximum pervious coverage proposed for the property is 15%, 30% permitted. The maximum building coverage proposed for the property is 7%, 15% permitted. So that's where I think that's what governs. So while we're comfortable with what we submitted, we'll be under independently. Again, I don't think we were supposed to go down that road.
Okay. Thank you
This
for
is
that.
one of those situations, Matt, where I would say that if the applicant feels comfortable that they've got the answer right, we can look into it and, you know, it's sort of at their risk if they don't want to wait for us to look into it.
I think
But
that's
it sounds like David's comfortable, they've got the answer right, he's probably right, but I would want to make sure before we issue
Yeah,
a decision.
we can do that during deliberation. Item number 2, we're dealing 2 and 3 dealing with heights. Okay, so the
So
2003 says you can go 40 feet. 2003 regs, right? Do I have that right? And the current regs say 28.
Right, the difference is in 2003, it was measured to the apex.
Oh, it's the way we measure it. So, so what staff has proposed here, as I understand it, is a sort of a compromise with at 35. Is that right? As measured from pre-construction grade. What does
Right.
the applicant say to that proposal?
That works fine for units 8 through 11, which are the ones up against up against Dorset Street. But because of the lay of the land, we went through this kind of in detail at preliminary. But you've got the units 8 through 11 that you're trying to keep just above the elevation of the path, and then the garage, which comes in from what I'll say is the backside. Those driveways we have as steep as we can at 10%. And then you have, that dictates the elevation of the road. So when you get to the units on the low side of the road, the land's all fading away from Dorset Street. Units 1 through 7, particularly 2 through 7, the front of those units are 2.5 to 3 feet above grade. Or I'm sorry, the front of the units are generally as much as 5 feet above existing grade, and the back of the units, the walkout, is approximately 2.5 feet above grade. So the 35 feet, I come up with, when I look at those units, I'm coming up with 37 based on pre-construction grade. It's because it's falling away from Dorset Street, it doesn't have the impact that a normal building of that height would have. But that's just taking the back walkout elevation, the front height, and averaging the two. So we're agreeable to 8 through 11, but on 1 through 7, we'd like to stick with the settlement agreement.
You want an extra 2 feet?
We just
Well, you
want
want an
to
extra 5.
we want to stick with the settlement agreement.
Okay, so you're suggesting you would agree to conditions on units 8, 9, 10, and 11, that it be 35 feet above pre-construction grade, but you want the ability to go to 40 feet pre-construction grade on lots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Right. By my calculations, Matt, there'll be about 37, but I don't feel that it's appropriate to. We know 8 through 11 are a non-issue, so that's why I'm agreeing to that. But I don't feel it's appropriate in this case to start splitting hairs, because we're going to have to show each of those homes individually when we submit for building permit, and those are custom homes. So if one comes out at 38 feet, I don't want to deviate from the 2003 agreement.
Okay. Any questions for the board on heights? Okay, moving on to number 4. The applicant estimates sewer flows at 2,718 GPD. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to obtain preliminary wastewater allocation prior to closing the hearing. I believe you said you did have that? No, is that correct?
Yeah. So we received the letter. We submitted it with the state wastewater. The wastewater's been issued. We forwarded over a copy of the wastewater permit just on Monday, but
Okay.
the state permit's issued. Also, Matt, on number 3, we kind of skipped over, but 3, we agree with that as related to what I said about 8 through 11, and obviously 1 through 7, that we also have to provide that information at building permit.
Yes. Number 5, 26 feet versus 28 feet. The requested roadway width is supported by fire and public works departments and creates a more neighborhood setting, while a wider roadway encourages higher speeds and provides more infrastructure to maintain. The board found this waiver request to be acceptable to preliminary plat. No changes have been made to the project affecting the waiver request. Staff recommends the board confirm acceptance of this request at the final stage of review. 26 feet, David, for the road?
Yeah, that was the suggestion of staff, Public Works. So the waiver request was part of the process more than initiated by us.
Right, but you're still agreeable to your project?
Yes.
Okay, moving on. Number 6. The applicant is proposing to impact the adjacent wetland through construction of a stormwater treatment practice. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to provide additional perimeter plantings and a split rail fence or line of landscaping boulders at the rear of lots 5 and 6 and 7 to prevent encroachment into the stormwater treatment practice and wetland buffer. Is this agreeable to the applicant?
It is. Some of these items are in our April 24th letter, and the April 24th letter does specifically talk about the split rail fence. And it's hard to find on the plans. I actually asked Dan, okay, where's it called off? But there is a split rail fence proposed along the back of lots 5, 6, and 7 on the west side of the stormwater. I don't know if you can go to sheet 3. Sheet 3 shows it the best, or it shows the stormwater features the best. For clarification, just as I clarified, or we clarified at preliminary, there's no wetland impact here. There's only buffer impact. This is the far end of a class 2 wetland that is a very legitimate wetland as you go over towards Park Road. And as you get to this property, it's a dry wetland. Still has the grasses, but the half a dozen times I've been out there, including with the state, it's been dry every time. But it does have the wetland grasses. It meets the hydric components. And so we're at the margins of a class 2 wetland. The stormwater, part of the lower part of that stormwater feature behind 5, 6, and 7 has wetland buffer impact. We would argue that it enhances it because the proposal is a gravelous wetland as far as the stormwater feature, followed by a dry pond. And on the westerly side of that, we do have a split rail fence proposed. And Terry Krinsky's plan does propose some additional landscaping at the back of those lots. There's not a lot of room, and when we get to landscaping, hopefully you'll agree with me. We don't feel that more landscaping is the right thing to do here, but the split rail fence will prevent those lot owners from encroaching on the stormwater feature and/or the wetland buffer.
David, can I ask a question? Is there any concern about why is the fence proposed at the back of the storm pond? If the intent is to prevent encroachment in the buffer, and the buffer is sort of like bifurcated by the storm pond, should the fence be at the front?
Well, I guess everybody might have a different answer to that. We don't really want the owners encroaching on the stormwater feature either. So we did propose it on the west side. Personally, I'd like to keep it there because that's what's been submitted, and the permit is pending with the wetlands division. So
I guess I'm seeing it on the east side. I'm sorry.
It is on the east side.
On the screen?
It's shown on the east.
It's on the east side of the stormwater feature, and it's at the toe of slope along the limits of disturbance. So
okay,
that stormwater pond could still be maintained and mowed. So that's why we were showing it down there.
Okay, so that's why Dan's here. So what that does is the buffer impact that's being proposed, the fence would follow that buffer impact. Kind of just inside the blue line is the construction silt fence, and that would be replaced with a split rail fence. there's wetland plant mix that goes in the gravelless wetland, and then Terry Krinsky's plan shows some plantings to the back of lots 5, 6, and 7.
So you need to mow the stormwater pond?
Well, the state stormwater permit requires annual inspection. Mow, no, but manage, yes. So if it's really management, the way our firm looks at it is management that affects the stormwater functions of the pond. So we do not look for active management of stormwater features. And we have to report to the state as part of the permit each year.
So sometimes you get growth in stormwater ponds with woody vegetation and stuff like that, and that would be, something that we would recommend as part of our annual stormwater inspection, that overgrowth and woody vegetation be removed, just so it doesn't deter from the treatment in the pond.
So is the board, I haven't heard anybody on the board say anything in a few minutes. How's the board feeling about having the fence at the back versus the fence at the front?
So your concern, Marla, is just the people with lots 5 and 6 and 7 are going to wander off and start mowing and into that area or walking into that area? Is that the purpose of having a fence there? We talk about encroachment,
Right.
with these
Yeah,
private-
and I guess if they encroach into the storm pond, that's sort of a state stormwater issue because, maybe it won't function as it's designed. But if the encroachment starts to happen into the buffer, that's more of a problem. So, I could go either way on this. And if the board doesn't have a problem with the way it's shown, then fine. But I just want to make sure everybody understands the question.
Could you put a fence on both sides?
Well, we've got a little different situation here. So when I see a fence as being a potential issue of not being enough, it's basically when people are throwing yard debris and stuff like that over the fence. So here with the stormwater component there and the state requirements for inspection of the stormwater component, that is a physical barrier. And it just gives these folks a little bit more feel of space by having the fence there. If I don't want this if this is the only item at the end, I don't want this to hold up the potential close. So if the board decides that the west side is better, I do not believe that wetlands would have a problem with that. And I would just want it to be close to the actual capacity of the storm system, because the upside slope of that storm system would put that fence quite close to lot 6 in particular.
Right.
Yeah, I understand Marla's comment, but I'm not inclined to require a fence there. I mean, it's these 3 lots.
I think the state permit and the condition of inspection of that kind of solves the potential, the normal potential issues.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
if we did want to move the fence further to the west, it could be placed at the top of the berm. That way they could still access the pond, but it would still provide a little bit more protection if the fence was along the top of the easterly berm, if the board was looking to have that moved.
So what Dan's saying is it would still be on the low side of the pond, but instead of being on the low side of the slope, it would be up at the top of the slope on the low side of the pond. That would be more visible. That's kind of, I guess, a hybrid between the 2 locations.
Okay. There's no other comments from the board. I'll move on to number 7. Visually compatible. No information on the appearance of homes located on lots 1 through 7 have been provided, and no design constraints pertaining to those homes has been suggested. Staff recommends the board discuss whether they should be appearance criteria for lots 1 through 7, or whether fully market-driven construction is acceptable.
So 7 and 8 are kind of together. And I'm going to unfortunately, the staff report, the items that that we have to have comments on are kind of loaded towards the front of it. But if you go to our April 24th cover letter and you go to the actual package that's on the town website, there was information provided. So I'm saying number 7 is not accurate. Based on the preliminary approval, and it's too bad that Mark had to step away because Mark was the one that was providing most of the input at preliminary. So what you see in that last picture, we provided, based on the preliminary discussion, Mark particularly suggested that maybe the best thing isn't elevations. I know this builder, I know the builder's quality, and I don't think that the previous perspective was accurately depicting that. So there was 2 components to follow up on. The one that's up on the page now, was up on the page, was the units 8 through 11. And the desire on 8 through 11 was that while they're all the same unit interior, change them up on the exterior. So as you can see from that photo, it kind of gets cut off from what was submitted. The 4 units are different. The gables, the peaks, the windows, there's just little changes to each one, so that they're not 4 of the cookie cutter ones. And while they won't necessarily be those exact colors, they'll be one of the colors of the 27 of the 28 that were submitted. We stated in our cover letter that the fire brick, which is kind of the dark red out of the 28 colors, only 27 of them max would be entertained. So I think 8 through 11 are addressed pretty easily. As far as the staff comments, you've got the 3 Google photos of homes that River's Edge, under the previous name of Shepherd Construction, did at Vermont National. Everything on the other side of Vermont National has been done by Tom Shepherd, and those homes were done. Those are on the Four Sisters Road at the back of the other side. And those are just samples of the quality of construction, level of detail that they do, that I felt was the appropriate way to address the comments based on the previous. So 1 through 7 are custom homes. We're committing to 27, no more than 27 of those 28 colors. We're committing to this level of detail. So, I'm not buying that we're stating that we're fully market driven here. We are providing quite a bit of detail for those units.
So I have a question. When you say custom homes, so somebody, a potential buyer, could come along and say, rather than the designs that you just showed, I would like a cape, a traditional cape, and that would be okay?
Probably not a cape. And the reason I say probably not is the cost of the land, the cost of the construction is likely not going to allow for a cape here unless somebody wants to vastly overpay.
Okay.
But custom homes means that these are just samples of this contractor's work. The level of detail will be similar, but in no means will possibly any of the 7 houses be exactly like one of these 3. But it was just to represent their quality of construction.
And on your rendering, where are the garages?
So are you talking about units 8 through 11?
Yes.
That is the Dorset Street side of those units. So the garages are on the public street side of the units. So you don't have, so that's if that picture is if you're on Dorset Street looking across the existing recreation path at these units.
Oh.
And the garages are on the back.
So the people across the street and back are going to be looking at a garage door, and is there another attractive feature that they'll be seeing?
Yeah, so the premise of units 8 through 11, and the reason that we showed so much of the Dorset Street side, was that they need to have two front facades.
Right.
So the back facade is similar, with the exception that the side that doesn't have a porch has a garage.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think the question is whether there be some sort of stipulations or conditions as they relate to the lots 1 through 7, or whether we just say, well, we've seen this work, and so we're not going to require anything else. Is there, board, is there a comment about items number 7 and 8, visual compatibility? Mark, you're not here, right? Our architect?
Now, Matt, the colors have been submitted. We're certainly committing to that color scheme. They're basically earth tone colors in the tans and grays throughout those two shades.
Glass house or anything like that, right?
Well, the reason that came up was the first rendering that was submitted had kind of a brighter red, and I said in no case would Shepherd be doing that. So the colors were a follow-up from preliminary.
Right. Okay. Any other comments regarding visual compatibility?
I need to talk about the tail end of number 8. So at preliminary, I think it was Don that had asked about the garages, and the garages being the same color as the units. And from my notes and from my recollection, I didn't hear a lot of other members, or quite honestly, any other members stating an opinion one way or the other. And it became a part of the preliminary condition. The builder does not want to match the garage doors, and the main reason for that is you can't get a perfect match. The siding companies and the garage companies are not the same, and he does not want to color match the garage doors by painting them, because it would be a long-term maintenance and appearance issue. So it's actually for the same.
That. I've tried it before. It's hard, and it's not a hill I will die on.
So what?
The garage doors stand out so much, though. But again.
Yeah. So we did review, the southeast quadrant, including new projects. All the trim of these homes, 99% of the time is white. And we actually think that beyond trying to paint the color, we won't preclude a buyer if they want to have a color that is complementary to the house color, but not white. We would encourage that, but we don't want to be stuck with a match because of the painting and maintenance issue. And we would like the possibility of white and/or complementary color.
I get that.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 9. Preliminary plat, the board found the front porch configuration shows an appropriate nod towards meeting the current SEQ standards. The board further found the garages must not protrude beyond the porches, and no more than 3 of the 11 homes may have garages which are flush with a porch. The portion of the building that is not the garage must be no less than 12 feet in width. The board found the color of the garage doors must match the palette of the main house and require the applicant to provide a color palette. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to incorporate the above conditions of preliminary plat into design requirements documents other than the color palette for the garage door.
Yeah, I apologize. I was thinking that was part of number 8. So we're good with it, other than the discussion we had on the garage.
Okay. Number 10, staff recommends the board review the proposed color palette and provide feedback, if any. Staff recommends the board make a determination on whether the color palette applies to all the homes or just the homes on lot 17. David, does it apply to all the homes?
It applies to 1 through 11, and it's the Norindex Cedar Knoll Deluxe Vinyl Siding. There was 28 colors, and all but the fire brick. As long as the board's okay with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
It was part of our April submission.
Mhm. Okay, staff comment number 11. The layout of the subdivision has been reviewed
Hey,
by the
Matt,
fire.
can we go back? I'm sorry to interrupt. I was muted there. We skipped 8. So because of the confusion about the garages, we skipped 8.
Okay. Regardless of whether the design criteria required by all the homes are just 8 through 11, staff recommends the board require the applicant, yes, that's right, require the applicant to provide a design requirements document to be incorporated in the homeowners association documents for the project, which defines how the proposed homes will meet the aesthetic required by this criteria. Staff considers such a document must be provided to the board's review prior to closing the meeting.
So given what David just testified, that the rendering shows the exact homes that are proposed, unless I'm getting that wrong, David.
It
then
shows
I
the
don't know
exact
that-
for 8 through
Yeah, I
11.
don't know that we need this, because if
Right.
we just say that the home shall look exactly as proposed in this drawing.
With the exception that they may be one of the 27 colors.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, that's great. Number 11, the criteria was found at master plan to need further review under the application's individual phases. The fire inspector had no comments on preliminary plat. At this final stage of review, the fire inspector requested on 5/28/2020 that the board can include a condition requiring that parking be limited to one side, that hydrants have 3 feet of clearance on all sides, and requested that no parking zone adjacent to the hydrants. Staff recommends that no parking zone should be 10 feet on either side along the curb line. Is that agreeable to the applicant?
Yes.
Okay. Number 12, at the preliminary plat, the board required the applicant to provide a draft notice of conditions that the pump station shall remain private. The applicant has provided such a draft notice. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to record the condition in a form of approved by the city attorney as a conditional approval. Is that agreeable to the applicant?
Yes.
Okay. And moving on. The Director of Public Works provided reviewed the provided plans on May 28th, 2020, and offers the following comments. Where the project road intersects with Dorset Street and the rec path, there is a proposed crosswalk across the rec path. We do not put crosswalks across our rec paths. Please have this removed from the project design.
We agree.
Okay.
I did do a follow-up email to Justin and said I agreed with item 1 and 2, and I gave him follow-up on item 3.
Okay, well, we'll just get it on the record here. The stop sign pavement markings can be just a stop bar. We do not need stop legend in these locations.
Agreed.
Okay, number 3, for vehicles exiting the project onto Dorset Street, I'm a little concerned with their southern sight distance for the northbound Dorset traffic. Landscaping plan shows what appear to be 3 existing trees on the east side of Dorset that may impair southern visibility. Please have the applicant confirm the appropriate sight distance exists. Staff recommends the board include conditions reflecting 1 and 2, and from the directors of public works, which sounds like it's agreeable to the applicant, and require the applicant to address the 3rd comment to Justin's satisfaction prior to closing the hearing. So what about these sight lines here? What can you tell us about that?
I don't know if it was to his satisfaction, but I trust it was. The standards for sight distance are 15 feet back from the fog line, 3.5 feet high, 3.5 feet high to the oncoming car. And then it's essentially based on 11 times the speed limit. So there's no issue at the 15 feet back. I think that the reason that Justin brought it up was what's going to happen here is the stop bar is behind the crosswalk, which is more than 15 feet back. So if a car were to stop there, there's the possibility that the first existing tree that's south of the entrance, that the lower branches, if they're not managed, could be an issue. So I didn't have it in the email, but I think the appropriate way to have a defined condition would be for us to include a site easement that encompasses that first tree and requires that it's maintained such that if you're back beyond the pedestrian path, that you would still have sight distance, even though that's not the way you're supposed to measure it. The only defendable measurement is at the 15 feet back. But in this case, we can meet the requirement back further as long as we have that, as long as we provide a site easement that encompasses the first tree to the south of the entrance.
I had the opportunity to talk to Justin about this. David, I think what you're saying makes sense. Justin just asks that it be a condition that prior to the CO for the road, that, you know, that it be confirmed that that tree has been appropriately limbed.
That's acceptable.
Great. Moving on to 14. Stormwater section chief. The staff recommends the board require the applicant to address comment number 2 prior to concluding the hearing, and that the remainder of the comments be incorporated as conditions of approval. Comment number 2. The applicant has suggested that an approved wetland permit will be forwarded to the city as a condition of approval as outlined in 1202 of the city's LDRs. Encroachment into class 2 wetlands is permitted by the city only in conjunction with the issuance of a conditional use determination by the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. The applicant should obtain an approved wetland permit prior to the DRB issuing approval, as the applicant has proposed locating their stormwater treatment practice in a class 2 wetland buffer. Is that agreeable?
Well, no. It's again, it is the buffer. We don't anticipate that it's just a matter of time, as usual, before we get this permit. Unless something is changed at the city, this is typically a condition of approval. I look back at 1760 Dorset Street, which granted was about 8 years ago, but it was a condition of approval and we followed up with a permit. So we're in the heart of construction season. Act 250, once this is approved and wetlands is approved, is ready to issue. And we don't really want to, if we get pushed to the end of July, we're not going to get approved till August. And then Act 250 is not going to come until the end of August. So I guess what I'm asking is that typically this has been a condition of approval. We would like it to be a condition of approval. We're the ones at risk, because if wetlands makes us change something, we'll have to come back to you. So I don't think there's any risk for the board to continue the practice of a condition of approval.
Okay. I hear what you're saying, David. Any other comments from the board on that? Number 15, the applicant has provided such a draft easement. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to provide an executed easement for the recording in a form acceptable to the city attorney as a condition of approval. This is regard to roads, utilities, sidewalks, recreation paths. Excuse me, this is under that category, but referring specifically to the permanent maintenance and easement for the sidewalk.
Agreed.
Okay. And item number 16. Since the applicant has not yet received a wetland permit, staff considered it not possible to provide such a document and recommends the board require the applicant to provide such a document assigning the maintenance responsibilities of the stormwater wetland permits to the homeowners association once the wetland permit is issued, in accordance with the comments of city stormwater section chief above and prior to closing the hearing.
So again, we would like you to consider that this be a condition of approval. The stormwater permit has been issued. It comes with maintenance requirements. It's actually, it's already written in. So the city attorney will be reviewing things after approval. So that part gets handled as far as it being the HOA's ongoing responsibility. And the wetlands permit, while it hasn't issued, same thing. It's going to be tied to the wetlands permit and the conditions of the wetlands permit. So we suggest, and maybe why it's a recommendation instead of a shall from staff, we suggest that we're tying ourselves to those 2 state permits, one of which is pending, and that the approval could do the same.
Yep. And if you don't get them, you'll be back.
Yep. Well, we got the stormwater, and we expect we'll get the wetlands.
Number 17, utility cabinets are not screened. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to provide utility cabinet screening.
So the April 24th letter it went through all the items, but it did specifically talk about the utility cabinets, and they, on sheet L3 of Terry Krinsky's plans, there is cabinet screening.
Can we take a look at that just to make sure everybody's clear on it? Because I clearly missed it. You said which sheet?
L3.
It's that electrical pedestal planning detail in the bottom of L3, and the plan view 2 above, you can see some screening around the electrical pedestals.
Center bottom of the page.
Okay, so you're proposing that at all of the cabinets.
All of the cabinets, and then jumping ahead to 18.
What does front mean in that detail? Does front mean street facing, sidewalk facing?
Front would be, yeah, facing the street, facing the public road.
What does the board think about that?
Is that is GMP require that?
The city requirement for utility cabinets to be screened.
No, to have the one side open.
GMP requires that it be accessible. Yeah.
Okay.
Terry Krinsky did reach out to Green Mountain Power before preparing that, just to see if there was any screening he could do in the front, but GMP did require that it be accessible with no plantings in the front.
I seem to remember.
So we've had sort of a conflict with GMP on this, and one of the things that we've settled on is, maybe that doesn't have to face front. Maybe it can be grasses that can be easily cut down if they need to get access. So there are definitely ways around it if the board wants to. What does the board think?
GMP needs access to the. I'd love to see something written from GMP says it doesn't matter if you screen the front or the back, but I gotta imagine they want to see the front, right? I mean, I don't know.
Well, our regulations do read that it has to be effectively screened.
Right, I think it specifically said from, what is it,
GMP
adjoining
would need
properties or something?
Right? I assume they just put the quickest line from the street to the cabinet.
Yeah.
I think they want it visible if they're going down the public road. It's just the opposite. But I'll jump in here and say that why don't we agree to moving one of those bushes to the front at the risk of upsetting GMP and removing one from the side. That still gets them pretty good access instead of being all around the back of it, and meets the city regulations much better.
Because the city regulations say we want the utility cabinet screened from the road, not from the.
Screen from view. Yeah.
It makes sense that that it would be from the road. So if the board's okay with us modifying that to shift one of the plants to the front and remove one from a side, that's what we'll do.
And GMP has never challenged us in where we.
GMP has always told applicants that they like the access as Dan's speaking to now. But as Marla was suggesting, if it's something that can be easily worked around, like a grass or something, that if they do have to cut it to get access, that it grows back easily versus an evergreen shrub or something. They would prefer not to have woody shrubbery in front of it.
And
so the specific requirement is there shall be sufficient landscaping with evergreens of sufficient height and density to screen effectively the facility from surrounding property. Like I said, one solution has been to plant grasses. Another solution has been to have the plantings far away. Obviously, that doesn't work in this case. I think David's solution sounds like a pretty good compromise too. This is one of those things where GMP may not object because they're just going to cut it down with a chainsaw if they have to.
So I'm looking at, I can't quite read the one on the screen, but I'm looking at my plan here, and I see what Terry did with the front saying GMP requirements for clearance from pedestal, but he does have 6 Carl Forrester feather reed grasses 2 feet on center on the front to the sides of the pedestal. Based on what one of the members is saying there, and then he's got the sea green juniper on the sides and the back. Why don't we just add another clump of the feather reed grasses on the front, and then we won't be ticking off Green Mountain Power, and if it gets mowed down, it'll grow back.
That seems good.
So they're perennial grasses.
You're getting beyond, that's why Terry Krinsky did this. So. But I would assume that he picked a grass that is there year round.
And has the,
We would need them to be perennials. They're going to bond for them for 3 years, so they better show up again.
Yep.
and on 18, has the landscape arborist looked at all this? Staff comment number 18.
We submitted back in April, so we'd like to think that he did. If he hasn't, we'll agree to any changes if he has any.
Yeah, David, I think I missed that little detail. So he did review the plans in general and didn't have any comments beyond what was included in the packet. So
okay.
If he reviewed it and says there's no comments, then he probably caught the whole thing.
Okay. Number 19, at the preliminary plat, the board required the applicant to provide landscaping to provide privacy for the proposed yards facing the fairway. Staff considers partial screening has been provided and recommends the board review the landscaping plan to determine if they find this criteria met. Okay, so we're looking at
sheet. You're kind of looking at sheet L1. Because I was listening in on the first item tonight, I didn't realize that we might be able to take credit for the trees that are part of the overall project, but in a way we are. We located those trees that are just off the property line, counting 6, 8, 10, 11 trees there. Those are hardwood trees. They're pretty good size now. They provide a pretty good buffer on their own, at least during the growing season. And those will all obviously be preserved. Those are not part of the landscaping plan as far as the cost. But those are on the golf course and those will be preserved. What Terry Krinsky did to address the neighbors' concerns was to propose additional groupings of plantings that you see at the back of lots 1 through 4 mostly. And then we do have some restrictions with there's 2 stormwater areas. We talked earlier about the one behind 5, 6, and 7. The other stormwater area is behind lots 3 and 4. And between that, the existing pump station at the back of lot 4 and 5, and some existing utilities, it gets interesting when you get towards lot 4 and 5 of where you can put a plant that's a tree that's going to be okay. But we'll get into this in much more detail on 21. We're at about 6 times the required landscape budget for this project. So I'd like to think that we have well enough landscaping compared to the requirements. And we did meet with the neighbors out there. We stood kind of in the area, mostly in the area of lot 2 to lot 1, looking at that end of the property, because that's where I think some of the neighbors that were at this meeting were from, across the 18th fairway. And they all left happy, thanking us for meeting with them, understanding the project better. We did agree that that the plantings, what Terry tried to do there was to propose the plantings to kind of fill in the areas of sight lines from the existing trees off the lot. But that when they got planted, if they were to shift 5 feet or so, because it would work better, that we were agreeable with the neighbors to do that if we have that flexibility with this approval. The one thing that, as a follow-up with the owner, one of the other things that Terry did on the plans was he called he called for a lattice below the decks. So again, lots 2 through 7, just with the lay of the land, those are going to be walkouts without putting in a bunch of fill and having more impact. It's just the way that the land is. So you have a deck, and the neighbors were concerned about basically the underdeck part and the walkout part of the homes. And Terry had proposed on the plans lattice with some ivy that could grow on the lattice to partially close that area. The owner would like consideration for lattice and I'm going to try to be specific here because I would like you to be able to close. If they don't have lattice, if we could plant 2 minimum 6 foot high evergreens on each side of the 10 feet off the deck to each side to provide buffering of the under the deck, the walkout part, that we have that as an option. So the plans show the lattice, and we'd like the possibility of adding 2 minimum 6 foot high evergreens, 10 feet off to each side of the of that upper deck.
Board have a preference to either one?
No, I think that makes sense.
Can you write that as an either or situation in a decision, Marlo?
Oh, yeah. So in lieu, it would say something like the applicant has proposed lattice to screen the areas under the decks on units 2 through 7. The board finds that the applicant may substitute 2 6 foot high evergreens on each side, 10 feet off of the deck, in lieu of the proposed lattice.
Right. Okay. Where are we now? We're at number 19? Or 20. We're at 20. At preliminary plat, the board found vegetation was required to support the residential character of the neighborhood. Solid wall fence or location or height design approval by the development review board may be substituted for required planting.
We're not, other than the split rail fence for the wetlands, we're not proposing fencing. So I don't think that there's a reply that's necessary on 20. I think it's just a statement.
Okay. Marla, is that right? What is the point of what are we getting at with number 20? We found vegetation was required to support the residential character.
I think it was more landscaping, moving to the plans that we have now.
Okay.
Right. So one of those things where the board said it's preliminarily found, do we still feel that way? It should be planting as opposed to walls or fences.
I see. Okay, budget required.
Changes.
Number 21, the staff recommends the board require the applicant to update their landscaping budget to reflect the trees outside of unit footprints on lot 8 and 11, outside lots 1 and 7, excluding street trees to evaluate compliance with this criteria. Staff recommends the board require this prior to closing of the hearing. Staff further recommends the board set the required landscaping bond amount based on the provided value. Finally, staff recommends the board require a separate cost estimate for street trees and require a street bond as described in LDR 1515.
So Monday, we, as part of what we sent over, Dan sent over an email to Marla, and this is one of the items that was part of that email. But as I just said, we're about 6 times the total landscape budget. Terry Krinsky's plans provided the cost, and all the numbers were there. So Dan broke those down. He removed the street trees. The street trees total $21,880. The whole landscape budget for this project was $14,380. So when you take out the street trees, and what we understood was we were supposed to take out all the other the foundation plantings for the homes that are part of the plans that we've submitted for approval, the utility landscaping, the utility cabinet landscaping. When we remove all of that, the street trees, the foundation plantings, and the utility cabinet plantings, there's still $39,355 of additional landscaping, which is still more than twice, 2.5 times the requirement for the whole thing. So all of the numbers are part of Terry's plans. What the email did was just break them down.
Okay, and you have those, right, Marla?
I do. Yep. I took a look at that. I think that's fine. I mean, it wasn't really a question of is there enough? It was a question of we need the proper accounting. And I think that they've done that with their supplemental information.
Okay. Is there anyone in the public that has a comment regarding final plat application SD 2018? You can either write in the chat box that you'd like to say something, write what you'd like to say in the chat box, or simply say your name. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on this project? Okay, hearing none.
So Jane Lawless would like to comment.
Jane?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Jane.
Hi, Matt and everyone. I have been following this project for, I guess it's been almost a year, and happy to have met with the Shepherd Company and out on the site a week or so ago, and listening to all of these things and reading most of it. I have about 4 or 5 comments. So let's see, number one, the easier one first, maybe. The pond that is near the property, I am unclear. I think you've answered this before. Is it on the golf course property or on the development property?
Jane?
It's
Jane,
oh, go ahead.
If it's a yes or no answer, that's fine. If you also have the opportunity to ask all of your questions, then we can
I'll wait.
Oh, well, could we do one at a time? It's easier for me.
Well, we do have, in the interest of time, we give public comment in order to, it'd be easier for all of us, I think, if we get all the comments on the record, and then we might be able to answer them more succinctly.
All right, so the pond was one, and I was just confused as to where the pond was in relation to the stormwater dry ponds. So that was number one. Number two was the height of the buildings 1 through 7. There probably can't be too much to be done about that, but I'm a neighbor who lives across the 18th Fairway, and so the higher those houses are, 1 through 7, the more it will impact our view and sight lines from the homes across the fairway. So I would love to minimize the height to whatever regulation is appropriate. Let's see here. Number 3 would be, you talked a lot about landscaping these past 15 minutes, and I'm a little, let's see. Part of that is, the question would be, why is the trellis as the walkouts from buildings 2 through 7, why would the trellises be not an option, and they would choose to plant 2 6-foot evergreens 10 feet off the property? So that's a question. And what else? The colors of the buildings of the custom homes 1 through 7, I emailed with Peter Shepherd, and I looked at the range of colors that they put in their documentation, and it's quite a range, even though you might take one off that list. Some of them are very bright or very dark, and certainly we're used to in the golf course development, everything is gray. So anything, any narrowing of the colors would be more appropriate in our eyes. And Peter suggested that instead of the 30 that are in the list there, in his email to me, he suggested they would reduce the number to 15 to 20. So I just have a comment on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane.
All right.
Thank you for your comments, and addressing those. Number 1, the pond near the property or golf course, David.
The pond is well off the property on golf course property.
Okay,
Regarding the heights, we've heard from the applicant that that they want to be able to go to their allowable under the 2003 regs of 40 feet. We have entertained a compromise of 35 feet of pre-construction grade that will be discussed during the delivery process. The trellis walkouts versus the trees. Am I hearing, Jane, that you prefer the trellis over the trees?
I just don't understand what the, why there would be a choice.
We're
I'm
not
not sure what I
precluding.
prefer, actually.
Yeah, we're not precluding the trellis. We want the evergreens as an option. With a walkout, the thought is some people that the trellis, once it's grown upon, it's going to basically black out their walkout. So the developer just wanted the option, and based on the neighbors wanting even more landscaping, thought that, well, if we don't put in the trellis, if we do more landscaping, that might be appropriate.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Thanks for explaining that.
It is. For the color, yes, there's 28, 29 colors in the palette.
We'll commit to 11 because there's not going to be more than 11 colors out there.
Well, I'd love you to reduce the bright and very dark ones if possible.
Okay.
Jane, thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to make a comment regarding this application? Okay, hearing none and seeing none in the chat box. Is there any other questions that the applicant has for staff or the board? Or is there any questions the board, the staff has for the applicant before we proceed?
Yeah, I think just for clarification, we agree with the recommendation for the what I'll call the restrictive height from the 2003 regs for 8 through 11, but we'd like 1 through 7 to stay per 2003. Not that we think we'll reach that number, but
we heard you loud and clear.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else from the board? If not, I will make a motion to close final plat application SD 2018. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Seconded by Don. Roll call. Brian Sullivan,
Aye.
Don Philibert,
Aye.
Tim Langdon. Aye. John Wilking is absent. Alyssa Portman,
Aye.
Mark Bear is absent. Matt Cota, chair votes aye. Vote is 5-002. And this hearing is closed. Thank you very much, David and Dan.
Thank
We now
you.
move
Thank you.
on to item number 9 on the agenda. Item number 9, SD 2004 1430 Heinsberg Road. Oops, excuse me. I went out of order. Number 9 is continued sketch plan application SD 2014, of Jennifer and Robert Morway for a planned unit development on an existing 15-acre lot development with a single-family home and barn. The planned unit development is to consist of 8 single-family homes and 1 existing single-family home at 1751 Heinsberg Road. This is a continuation of a sketch plan application. The sketch plan, for those watching at home, is a high-level review and discussion where an applicant receives feedback from the board on the major elements of her project before it is fully designed. During the meeting, the board may provide oral guidance to the applicant, which constitutes the board's determination that the application meets the purposes of the land development regulations. These comments are to help guide the applicant into a later application that meets the LDR requirements and contributes to the goals of the comprehensive plan. This is not a formal hearing, does not result in a binding decision. Upon conclusion of the sketch plan hearing, an applicant who wishes to move forward with the project will have to submit a complete application, and that next level of review includes additional public notices and a formal public hearing. So who is here for the applicant for continued sketch plan application SD 2014?
Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates.
Welcome again, David.
And we also have Jennifer Morway monitoring the hearing tonight.
Hi, Jennifer. Okay, so on this sketch plan, tell us what has changed since we last spoke.
So in this particular case, what these plans show in front of you is actually the extension of the proposed roadway to the southerly boundary. So that was consistent with one of the land development regulation requirements. Originally, we had shown it stopping short with a hammerhead turnaround. One of the questions of staff previously was whether or not this particular roadway could actually be a loop that would come back down to Vermont Route 116 in the easterly direction. So again, to orient you, north is straight up on this particular plan, and the long building that's at the south end, that's the existing barn, and to the right of that barn is the existing house. But nonetheless, one of the questions was whether or not it was feasible to make this a looped roadway. We approached the Agency of Transportation and copied staff on that particular correspondence, and asked the question as to whether or not the Agency of Transportation would offer or accept a looped roadway in this particular case. And they indicated in their correspondence back on May 27th that they felt that NATO Crest Road Drive was a suitable means of access for this particular project, and that a second entrance onto Vermont Route 116 would not be an acceptable approach or design and inconsistent with their access policy. So we took that as being.
I'm sorry, can I clarify something? Was the ask to create an additional curb cut on 116, was the ask to V-Trans, or was the ask to utilize the existing driveway to the home, the brick home there on Heinsberg Road as the curb cut?
The ask was to create another curb cut onto Vermont 116 as creating a looped component.
Okay, so it wasn't to use the existing driveway, the existing curb cut on this property.
I think that's what we showed. I apologize if that's not the case, Marla, but that is my understanding.
I think it was more of a general question, like, you
Okay.
know, understanding that this driveway is not really used today, would you allow access for this road onto 116, regardless of where it is, assuming it's somewhere in the vicinity of the project rather than like way down at Choose Factory Road?
Right. But the difference to me is adding another curb cut to Heinsberg Road versus utilizing or reconstructing an existing one. You know, much
Yeah,
like
it's a little bit of a, I guess, a red herring, because the existing curb cut, while V-Trans cannot require them to remove it, sees very little action today.
Well, yes. Yeah. Right. I guess what I'm getting at is V-Trans, the idea that we are, that even with utilizing existing curb cut on this existing property, they have said no.
Well, so that was Dave's initial conversation, and then the staff comments sort of reflect an update to that.
Yep. Hey, Matt, just to update you, the plans we sent Jim Clancy at the access permit utility section actually had superimposed a yellow roadway on top of the route from the proposed roadway down past the house, so it would have fallen right on top of the existing curb cut.
Okay, so that's what they saw.
Yes, they said despite the fact that there's existing curb cut there, that they did not feel that this particular proposed roadway should tie back into 16 at that location.
Okay, so I'm reading the comment here. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to provide access off of Vermont Route 116 to the southern portion of the subject property. If additional direct communication from the staff of V-Trans indicates such connection would not be allowed without the development on the dirt capital parcel, staff recommends the board require at minimum roadway configuration which facilitates this future access and the dedication of an easement for future connection. So to summarize, V-Trans says no connection just for these 8 lots plus the existing lot or existing building, but yes, in order to access the dirt capital partners property if that were to be developed in the future. Is that, am I summarizing that correctly?
Not exactly, but close, and I apologize.
No.
I think the reason for it being not exactly is because the statement you just read out is a if then. At the time that we wrote the packet, and indeed continuing on to today, we had a conversation with Jim Clancy at V-Trans on June 2nd, and kind of explained the development potential of this whole area. And he said, oh, wow, that's news to me. I was expecting a lot more development on parcel B, which is the one immediately south of the subject parcel. He said, given that there's only limited development potential on that parcel, that's a horse of different color. So I want to go back to my boss and talk about it. We were anticipating that we would allow one more roadway between Nato Crest Drive and Cheese Factory Road. The reason we said no to Dave Marshall is because we didn't want requests coming in every year for the next development and the next development to have a series of connections along that stretch of 116. And we said, totally agree. We don't want to see 100 connections there either. We just want to see one, which is what you said you wanted to see. And he said, cool, let me talk it over. As of today, I still don't have an update from him. So the statement that AOT may be okay with that location is speculative.
Okay.
So Delilah, I have a request of you. Can you zoom in to the area between the two big barns and near the existing brick house?
Second,
Yes, yeah, even a little bit more, but that's good. For starters, there you go. So one of the concerns we have with anything trying to fit through here is that there's just not enough room. So from the corner of the barn to the property line, there's 38 feet. And from the edge of the house to the property line, there's 48 feet. And even if you waive the front yard setbacks, we basically are, we can't fit physically a roadway and supporting utilities or walkways through this particular area. So our concern is that it's significantly going to impact the existing house, even to the point where when you come off the curb cut on Route 116 and install the roadway in accordance with the public works standards, or I should say the land development regulation standards, you're going to end up with a 4-foot cut 4 feet outside of the existing garage and building. So you're going to significantly change the character of what's happening at that particular historic building. And if this were an Act 50 project, the Division of Historic Preservation would be to pound sand. So my concern is that we're trying to work way too hard in this particular constricted area. Now, nothing says that Dirt Capital can't come forward and do their own thing, but right now, trying to jam a roadway on top of the Moorways property, I think is just not reasonable or feasible because of those particular things. And asking them to tear down their buildings to facilitate this, I think is a bit of a challenge. So we offer that as far as the physical challenges, because we did look at this earlier on, and which just didn't make sense with regard to the physical limitations of the area. So that's at least where we're coming from in regards to the continued looking at that particular curb cut.
So what you have here, Dave, is a road that it dissipates or plans for the possibility that that parcel to the south is developed in some shape or manner, and that would be where a connection could occur, but it doesn't necessarily dictate whether or not Dirt Capital would have to have their own curb cut, which may be further south, not on your property.
Yeah, I mean, right now we've brought the roadway right to Dirt Capital. And I think the biggest challenge that we have as far as planning is concerned is whether we want not.
Oh, Dave.
You're freezing up, Dave.
Here. So I understand where they're coming from, where they'd like to put lots, and ultimately, what basically kiboshed their project was that there was so much roadway cost that they couldn't make it work. So
we lost a lot of what you said. You were frozen.
I'm sorry, Milo.
We lost a lot of what you just said. You were frozen.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, you were talking
Uh,
about dirt capital. You want to start at the top with dirt capital?
So
Sorry.
I was just saying that on Dirt Capital, I personally did their planning for them a year ago as far as how to utilize different parts of the property. And one of the challenges,
Hmm.
can you hear me?
We got you now, David.
You're
All
cutting
right,
in and
well,
out.
you can't see me. Maybe you can see me. Oh, that's better. I don't know what happened, but nonetheless, I was just saying that on the Dirt Capital end of things, I personally did their planning for them a year ago as far as how to develop different portions of their property. And one of the challenges for them is that there was so much infrastructure cost or lack of ability to gain access to water and sewer that they just couldn't justify those particular areas. And extending this particular roadway to the south would actually create an opportunity for them that they didn't have before. Nonetheless, I think from a planning standpoint, we need to basically understand whether or not this particular roadway coming off of Nato-Cast Drive is appropriate to service, the 8 lots plus perhaps another 9 of Dirt Capital at some point in the future. Or, does Dirt Capital have to bring this roadway back down to Vermont 116 at an appropriate location? So, those are big questions, things that none of us can control at this particular point in time. So I think we just offer that as far as ideas in regards to why we've shown this particular roadway the way we did.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Dave's on the right track here, and I'm looking through what we said in the staff comments, that the city council is sort of working on some things in their executive sessions regarding the dirt capital parcel, and due to various funding deadlines, we anticipate there'll be an update in early July on the conservation status of the dirt capital parcel, which will strongly dictate the number of units that could be developed. And then we'll start to have an idea of, okay, if it's going to be 9 homes on the dirt capital parcel, then the board can start to say, well, all right, we are just imagining that this road serves the 8 homes that's proposed on Jennifer Morway's parcel, plus another 9 on dirt capital, or dirt capital could potentially develop 40 homes on that whole northern portion. And then obviously that looks like a very different thing to this board. So the one thing we can say, I think, is that in Dave's analysis when he was working on the other side of the table for dirt capital, is that the development potential for this parcel is for the dirt capital parcel is the northern portion of it. Is that right, Dave?
Yes, either central or the northern portion. They like the most northern area primarily because of the views that are afforded at that location.
Yeah, and I think there's some issues of proximity to the remaining portion. It's dirt capital is sort of this holding company for bread and butter at this time, but if things fall through, dirt capital will sort of take over from bread and butter. So in the perfect world, bread and butter farms a portion of the dirt capital parcel, and then the remainder to cover the costs of conserving that land through agriculture is developed. So how much of that dirt capital parcel gets developed is sort of going to be fleshed out in early July. But at this time, as noted in the staff comments, we're not really sure what that development is going to look like.
So Marla, it's Dawn here. Those roads, Russet Road and Senator Street, those don't exist now, correct?
Those have final plat approval. I think they're waiting for Act 250 or something. Yeah, that's
Okay.
Cider Mill 2.
That's, pardon me?
It's got a fancy name, but that's the second phase of Cider Mill.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
So Russet Road that you see on the left was required to be extended to the edge of the Cider Mill 2 development so that it could be connected to adjoining parcels. This is the same standard that we're talking about for this project. At that time, the conservation status of the dirt capital parcel was even less well known. And we anticipated that, or the board anticipated, this is all before my time, that Russet Road would connect to some development on the dirt capital parcel. Now it's looking like that maybe there's not the best alignment of Russet Road and we're having a little bit of buyer's remorse on it. Maybe it would have been better to have Lindemack Street extend straight out so that there was some connection potential there. But unfortunately, we can't force the Cider Mill 2 developer to amend their final plat to fit better with the current scheme for the dirt capital parcel.
Okay. Where do we go from here? Want to talk about the road some more? Anyone else on the board? Questions about the road?
So this being sketch, I think that they could probably use some feedback. If the
Well,
board needs to digest it, we can continue them. One meeting, I know we don't really have room on the next meeting, but if it's just for the board to provide feedback, we can
So-
just do that.
so here's my question. So say V-Trans has said, no can do. We stop this lot here. The Dirt Capital Partners property never gets developed. This road here becomes a public road with a dead end. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, because the stipulation is, I should know this by heart by now, but after a certain amount of feet, right? You can't have what is it? What is the rule again, Marla? Can
Unless
you
it extends to the property line, it has to be greater than 200 feet long.
No greater than 200, we're well over that. Okay. But we have to build this road and maintain it as if it were a road that connects to all these different possible development sites, right?
Right.
That would be our requirements. Would be
I
to
mean, at
create
this point in time, we felt that it would, if we were the DRB, you would be saying, this has potential development, potential beyond the Moreways property, and that we need to at least make sure we don't mortgage our future as far as the ability for this particular roadway to be used by other people. So we have designed this to a public road standard. I suppose it could have been shorter and less number of units and be a private road, but we basically recognized that because of the development patterns that's occurring in this particular part of the city, that it just seemed to make sense to commit to that and basically enable this particular roadway to serve an important function in the future with regard to connectivity. So that's why we brought that all the way to the south line, and that's why we always had it as a public roadway width, and that's where we are today.
Okay. Okay, so you're building a public road essentially to accommodate the extra lots rather than stub it off at 200 feet as a private road, and because you'd have less developable lots with that project. Is that accurate?
That's also accurate, yes.
Well, I think that's, if you can't connect to Heinsberg Road, you're not going, you're choosing not to make it a dead end road at 200 feet. You're going to accommodate the future development here and pay for the road build out. I don't know what the other option is here other than.
I guess I would just ask that, I'd like to hear from other board members, and I'm sorry for interrupting because I feel like that's where you're going. Any future preliminary plat, be cognizant of what happens with city council in the next month and what happens with conservation of dirt capital.
No, I know, and I know, but dirt capital could sell. Things could happen, and we could have a proposal in a month to develop that property. I mean, it's unlikely, but it's within the realm of possibility. And the city council may not do anything. We sort of have to take it what's in front of us. Okay. I don't know
Other
if I
board
have.
members want to weigh in on that?
Sure. I think the applicant has done all the applicant can do at this point in time. And I don't think it would be wise for us to impose a condition for them to do something in the future that they're not currently able to do.
That makes sense to me.
Tim or Alyssa?
I would agree.
Yeah, I would agree as well.
Keep in mind, this is sketch. This is not, we're not writing a decision. This is feedback for the applicant on how they should go forward for a decision.
So the feedback is not to figure out how to make the road connect to Heinsberg to 116. The feedback is to understand that if you're going to pursue this, you're building a road that's going to accommodate the lot to the south to make that connection, and you're building a public road to those standards.
Understood. Thank you for the guidance.
Okay, residential design. The applicant has shown building envelopes for the proposed buildings, or what appears to potentially be building envelopes, which are located 30 feet from the edge of the pavement or the back of the sidewalk, with the exception of lot 3. The applicant testified on 519 that lot 3 could not be designed to meet the residential design requirements of the SEQ-NR. However, perhaps due to audio issues, staff considers not clear why this is the case. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant to describe why they believe lot 3 cannot meet the residential design requirements of the SEQ-NR. Staff doesn't think there's issues related to topography, ledge, or other natural resources affecting this lot. Recommends the board direct the applicant to demonstrate compliance with all residential design requirements at the next stage of review. Staff considers the applicant's request for custom design homes should not preclude the requirement to meet these criteria.
So I'll jump to the lot 3 discussion. Marla, I don't know if you can zoom in on that particular area. I think sheet C2.1 would probably be the best tool for that, or you can use this one too. It'll still work. The primary reason that this particular home is set back from the street is you can see a line of trees. These are the ones that are larger in nature, and when you go out on the site, they're larger in nature. All we wanted to do was basically protect that line of trees because they seem to create a significant feature on the landform. And now some of them are on their way out as far as their age and quality. I think probably the next step would be to identify exactly their quality and whether or not they're subject or would be opportunities for appropriate retention, or if they're going to die or are dying, then perhaps this would be the opportunity to create a punch a hole in that particular area. But that's the only reason that particular building envelope is set back from the roadway, and that's really all it is. So here's what our surveyors have done in the past week is we've picked up the location of all of these particular trees. So we now know exactly where they are. And the next step is just to basically do an inventory of this particular line of trees to see how, their health and whether or not it's prudent to retain them because of their character in this particular area, or whether, we're basically just doing bad design because we like to hug trees. So that's on me to come back and explain better what that particular condition is. But that's the reason why it's set back.
Matt, you're on mute.
My apologies. Thank you, Delilah. Natural Resources Protection, LDR 9.06B describes that open space areas must be located in a way to create usable contiguous open spaces between adjacent parcels. The applicant has laid out lots so that it's best to create the best views from the highest point in South Burlington. As indicated on the plans, extensive tree clearing within the lots except for small buffers located on the property lines. Staff considers that proposed tree removal serves no ecological purpose and recommends the board review the proposed tree removal as indicated on the plans by the scallop line and discuss the establishment of a significant no clear zone that creates the connected and protected open spaces. Staff recommends the board direct the applicant to provide for common lands in the portion of parcels not proposed for development to include wooded areas, areas of ledge, and stormwater management features. Okay.
So in this particular case, this plan identifies what we are proposing to conserve as far as open areas, and that's basically the milky area on the left side of this particular plan, and left end and upper end. So that's basically west and north components. That's actually a combination of both the steep slopes and the flat area down at the bottom. This is contiguous to Mr. Nato's property to the west, and that was at least the starting point as far as discussions on how to basically conserve certain lands. We're not going to apologize with regard to how we would like to at least create some view sheds from each of those particular lots in the westerly direction. Can it be modified in a more prudent manner? That's an option. But at the same time, so in a way that we're not denuding the top of this particular hillside. I think that's an appropriate design standard that we should be shooting for. But nonetheless, in this case, as we review this also, I think there's opportunities perhaps to extend this particular conservation area higher up the hillside, which is a ledge outcropped area, so to achieve the written standards going forward.
So the highest point on this is in lot 8, right? Where's the high point here?
Yeah, it's kind of right in the middle of the property.
On lot 8?
Yes.
Okay, so it's in the middle of lot 8 so everything is viewed obviously towards the beautiful views of Mount Mansfield and Camel's Hump that way. Nothing looks down on the NATO property or the cider mill too, correct?
No, those have a westerly view, don't they?
Yes, it's actually 360 degrees. Some of them you're looking through trees, but nonetheless, it is spectacular up on top there. And as far as the NATO house, you're looking right over the top of it. You don't even notice it down below when you are trying to take in the panorama of what the opportunities are on that top of the property. So that's what we're trying to at least capture. I think there's ways to still retain the many of the trees, the majority of the trees, I'd like to say, that create this canopy on top of the hillside. This is the same discussion we had down on Long Drive within the Vermont National Country Club project. Again, the concept of maintaining the general shape of the features that are on the property, which again, it starts with the land and then extends up with the vegetation. So I think that's really one of the goals that we have in regards to how to situate these particular buildings within those particular specimen trees. Now that we have them all mapped, we can basically do a better job of providing appropriate level of planning on achieve those goals. And that's really what we're trying to do, which is a balance of not only taking advantage of the view sources there are. I'm not going to apologize, it's really nice, and then but at the same time also try to maintain the character of this particular area as seen from afar. You are going to see some new homes here if this were approved, and but at the same time, we don't want them to be the only feature out here.
So I think what I'm hearing from staff is that we want to see some information on why you're removing certain trees, which trees you're going to save, much like we have done with other projects.
That's
Right,
correct.
and the second comment that's sort of tangential to that, well, I guess I would just remind the board, 9.06B talks about conservation of natural resources. And so, the trees are part of it. And then they've referred to the conservation area to the rear of the lots. If this is indeed a conservation area, would the board like to see it have some restrictions?
Or would it be like you would have in a common land for the development, or is that what you mean, restrictions?
Right.
Like no, if you buy lot 9, This part is where developable area, this part is common land.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the idea is if, how do you access that? If that area becomes an area where you can take a walk or whatever, explore that area. I don't know, you've got that big, you need a switchback in order to get back there. I don't know, I'm sort of
So
looking at,
it's not just about, open space and recreation. The city obviously has some groups that are very focused on natural resource preservation for natural resource sake. So not all conserved lands necessarily have to be publicly accessible, and maybe you still walk through there, when you're bird watching, but it's not something you do every day.
So just to represent where the applicant came from on this is that we superimposed on the comprehensive plan all of the maps to go in within that particular document and all the resource areas that they've identified. And basically the proposed roadway basically fits in within the steep slopes that are identified within that particular plan and doesn't impact any of the other resource areas identified in the comprehensive plan. So yes, we can basically go and micromanage this down to the grade of blade of grass, but that's an exaggeration. But I'm just trying to say is that we looked at all of those mapped resource areas and designed a project around them. So I'm just trying to understand where is it going to end. We understand that there are always going to be certain things that nobody can put all the information in the comprehensive plan, but nonetheless we're here to basically try to balance those particular issues that are written or not written in a manner that balances the opportunities on this particular property. So that's kind of where we're coming from with regard to at least a minor pushback on saving every tree on this particular property.
well, I think the comments from staff is not just about trees, but about preserving an area of the property without being developed on, and whether that's sort of accommodation, whether that's moving the lots or creating some sort of agreement where there's common area, where we're not going to see fences, sheds, other things built, even though the lot, how you configure that, how you develop common areas in this, I'm not quite sure, but.
Hey, Matt, well, that's what we intended. Well, that's what we've tried to show here. It doesn't show up very well on this particular sheet, but again, where this is the milky hatching that is on the west and north sides, as well as on the east side. These are all areas that are subject to a conservation easement that basically allows everybody's access into these common areas. They happen to be parts of individual lots, but nonetheless, they're intended to basically be a comprehensive bringing together of all these various features so that they can be used, and that we're not going to have secondary impacts of the residential use in those particular areas. So the nice thing is some of these are significantly separated from the proposed development areas because of topography, and you get down into the far bottom left side and north side, that's a big flat, and it's an area that for whatever use that is appropriate, whether it be gardening or throwing a baseball or any number of things, we've tried to reserve certain areas that the property owners need to recognize that they are here for a more common good than anything else.
And does that milky area include the areas to the east here by like lot 3 and lot 2, or is that?
Yes.
Is that okay?
That's not a drafting error, not a production error. That is also more of the open space area that is being preserved through some sort of encumbrance to enable more use by the common entity.
Okay. Another part of this comment about natural resource protection is about the walking trail. Will this be a popular amenity? There was some doubt. No changes have been made. Staff notes the walking trail on the west side of the parcel is proposed to be immediately adjacent to a stormwater conveyance swale, which may result in the portion of the trail being unusable during wet weather. Is that right over here to the back of the NATO property? Is that the reference?
No, on the right-hand side of the page.
Yeah, so it should say on the east side, and what we intended to do was basically create a berm or a backboard for this particular swale, which would actually be above existing grade, and that would be where we would site this particular walkway. So it actually would be drier than any other portion of the property through this area. So we felt very confident that that is, but we need to come back with the details to convince staff that we know what we're talking about on that one. So
I think the
that's where
comment
we're-
here was just that the board had some feedback on buffering this path so that people would want to use it. And we just wanted to make sure that you were clear on that. Not asking you to do anything about it now, but we noticed you didn't do
Yeah.
anything. So just want to make sure that was
So
received.
Delilah, yeah, you're heading in the right direction. So when you get near lots 7 and 8, that is the location in which we have chosen to bring the walkway off of the sidewalk and basically work down the hill, basically using switchbacks and the like to basically make up grade change. And one thing that we could do at that particular location is actually create 2 separate curb cuts for one for 7 and one for lot 8. And basically between the curb cuts, create a green space where this particular walkway would go. So, here I was just trying to do the right thing and combine curb cuts, but the opportunity to create a more or less feeling like you're encumbering or walking through somebody else's property, that's the opportunity we have to basically enable this particular pathway to, be less encumbered by people's driveways or presence to those driveways.
I think that makes sense to have a separate curb cut there. If you're going to, is that the only place you can really access the back of the lot there? Is through that walking trail, or is there another?
Well, I think you could choose any number of locations. I think we tried to use the one that, from a topography standpoint, tried to work with it more than not. But if you chose a location, you could eventually figure out how to basically get down through. But there are some very steep slopes as you move in the westerly direction, and we were just trying to figure out a way to avoid those. So that was one of the reasons why we at least chose that location. And the other side of the coin, honestly, was that it was a mid-block area. That for other projects that the city has approved in the past, where we have a recreation path that represents the mid-block component of the road system. Here we have a recreation path narrower than a traditional 8 to 10 foot recreation path, but it's one that represents the ability for pedestrians to basically do this loop around the entire property and come back in this middle section.
Yeah, well, I think not having it cut through that middle of that driveway to the 2 homes.
Okay.
Benefit.
Yeah, we'll improve upon that.
Okay.
So where would people park? If you're envisioning that these are walkways for people to enjoy, where would you envision people would park their car who come there to do this?
Well, there is parking on one side of the road of the proposed roadway. So based on, the lay of the roadway, we feel that there's opportunities there. Otherwise, we hadn't envisioned a parking lot, for that particular purpose. And, and again, this, I don't want to say it's exclusive. That's never the intent. Obviously, the people that live here will fully recognize the opportunity to basically do a walk around the neighborhood. But also, as the other areas immediately to the west get built out, there will be opportunities for those particular people also to utilize this area, I suppose.
That's a good question, David. You're going to you get 150 homes inside of Mill 1, 150 or whatever we have inside of Mill 2. The ability to walk through a street on the sidewalk and then take a nature path through there is going to be very tempting for those 600. I live right over there. This is the most beautiful view ever. I would walk here if I wasn't kicked off by. So this would be not exclusive to the 8-9 lot owners. This would be essentially a public resource to be
Yeah.
maintained by your association or whatever you create.
I think you're Matt, you're spot on in regards to the opportunities and the like, and that's why I think we need to look a lot harder at lot 7 and 8 in order to basically ensure that not only can people feel that they can use the pathway, but at the same time that the people that live on lot 7 and 8 don't feel that they've got people walking through their front yard. So we've got to basically improve upon that as it relates to that particular separation of uses.
Okay, thank you. David, do you have any other questions?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
NATO Crest Drive does not exist currently, does it?
That is correct. It does not.
Okay, thank you.
So
Right.
this was one of the discussion points at the last meeting. Sorry, Matt, where
Wheels Drive, right? I mean, it does
True.
exist, it just doesn't exist as NATO Crest Drive.
it's an existing driveway that ultimately is going to be improved to serve the cider mill project. And at this point in time, this project also relies upon the cider mill project for its wastewater disposal. So there's definitely going to be some partnering and timing issues in order to enable this particular project to move forward.
And that is in, just for the public and the rest of the boards, that's in the narrative that you gave, that in the packet from June 1, addressed
That's my
tomorrow,
understanding.
which
I think at least it, oh, I'm sorry, yes.
which
We did
basically
provide,
lays out the recognition that this doesn't work unless cider mill 2 is built out. For
you are correct. There was correspondence we provided that stated June 1st, that provided responses to each one of the original staff comments. Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Are there any other questions the applicant has for staff or the board? David, any questions? Jen Morway, any questions? Hearing
we're good.
none. Hearing none, is there a member of the public any members of the public that would like to speak about this sketch plan application? If so, say your name or write in the chat comments. Okay, hearing none, if there's no other questions from staff or the board, we'll see you. Have a good night. Okay, moving on.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 10, which is the minutes from June 2nd. Has everyone on the board had the opportunity to review the minutes from June 2nd?
Yeah.
Any questions or changes to those minutes? If not, I would move that we approve the minutes from June 2nd.
I will second that.
Seconded by Don. Okay, we can do a voice vote for those. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Those abstentions? No. Okay, item number 11, other business. Is there any other business to discuss? Hearing none, then I would close the South Burlington Development Review Board meeting for June 16th, 2020. Goodbye. Good night.
Not everyone.
Thanks, Matt. Good night.
Good night, everybody.